Good evening. We will call to order the August 22nd meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. First item of business is the roll call.
Here.
Commissioner Schroeder. Here. Commissioner Platter.
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Here.
Commissioner Stone.
Here.
Chair Grable.
Here. Next item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. Any additions or corrections to the agenda that anybody wishes to have? Okay, hearing none, take a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The agenda is approved. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held July 25. Are there any corrections, additions, changes of any type to be made to the minutes? Commissioner Platter?
Yeah, I was technically missed the roll call, but I was here about a few minutes after. If you'd want to correct that, please. Thank you. I want to get my 100%.
Yes, he's got 100% he's got to maintain, so he's in fierce competition with Commissioner Forrest here. Any other changes to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. The minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is community comment. As was stated earlier, during community comment, any member of the public can address the commission on a subject of interest. If it's on tonight's agenda, please wait for that agenda item to come up. If it's been considered in the last 30 days, we've already heard about it, so I will ask if any members of the community would wish to address the commission on any topic of interest. Yes, ma'am. Jackie says yes, there are.
Would you like one?
Yes, I would.
Anyone else wish to address the commission on any particular issue? Okay, we will move to the next item then, which is public hearings. The first item under public hearings is a front yard setback variance for Daniel Wagner and Lindsay Garrity at 5,000 Schaefer Road, Edina, Minnesota. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The subject property is owned by Daniel Wagner and Lindsay Garrity. It is a corner lot. It's located at 5,000 Schaefer Road. As you can see, it's just south of Interlochen Boulevard and west of Schaefer Road. This is an aerial photograph of the property. What you can see is that the garage is loading off of Interlochen, and then the front door is facing Schaefer. A little more detailed aerial photograph. This particular property is subjected to 2 front yard setbacks. The setback along Interlochen is actually established by the front yard setback at the home to the west. The front yard setback along Schaefer is actually determined or set by the home that was built to the south. As you can see, probably about half of the subject home overlaps the required front yard setback of the adjacent house. This is a photograph of the home as it exists today, fronting Schaefer Road. You can see on the north side is the garage, which loads off of Interlochen. It's at a lower elevation. The garage floor is lower than the main floor of the house. Currently, to access the garage, there's stairs going down to the basement. property owner would like to add a third garage stall and a small mudroom behind so that they can have steps up into the main level of the house. This is the home that's adjacent to the west that is facing Interlaken, and the house that's neighboring to the south that's at 5004 Schaefer Road. This is a site plan survey of the property showing existing and proposed conditions. What I'll have you note is this is the existing home footprint. To the south, in this highlighted area that's quite light, is actually an addition that's under construction. It does meet all of the ordinance requirements. The box that you see dashed in here is actually the buildable area of the lot. The higher boxed in area actually just shows you where the front corner of the existing house is relative to Interlaken Boulevard. There is an addition going off the back of the house with a portion of that addition overlapping into the front yard setback area, but they're allowed 200 square feet, and that addition overlapping is about 134 square feet. So all of the additions that they've received a permit for currently do meet the requirements. And as part of their Phase 2 project, they would like to add a 12-foot wide addition to their garage that would go westerly. The garage isn't completely parallel to Interlaken, so the new garage stall is actually going to be further away from Interlaken than the existing garage stall. And then there's a small mudroom behind. This shows you the floor plan that's being proposed. Again, the existing garage with the garage addition, very small mudroom with an access going up to the mudroom that goes into the main level of the house. They are maintaining the integrity of the Rambler. They're not changing, they're not adding a second floor. Most of the improvements really won't be visible. Well, they won't be visible really from Schaefer. This is the east elevation, just a portion of the house. This is the garage pretty much as it exists today, and a portion of the front of the house. This then would be the new elevation that would be fronting Interlaken with the addition of that garage stall that is inset and further back away from Interlaken and is actually at an angle to Interlaken, and then you can see the mudroom behind. This then is the elevation sort of looking towards the back of the house or the east side wall with that small mudroom addition and the addition of the garage. The adjacent home to the west is set back 122.5 feet from Interlaken, establishing the setback for the subject property. The subject property is actually located 76.2 feet away. The improvements would be 84 feet away, so they're actually going to be further away with that new addition. They'll be 7.8 feet further back from Interlaken than the existing garage wall. The building design, the proposal is to extend the garage, add a mudroom. They will be using matching materials with what they will be finishing the new additions and the remainder of the house with. The primary issue is the proposed development reasonable for the site. Staff does believe the proposal is reasonable for a number of reasons. The proposed use is permitted in the R1 zoning district and complies with all requirements with the exception of the north side street setback. Setbacks will not change, and the building footprint on the property will be towards the side or to the rear and not affect existing street sight lines. The home is appropriate in size and scale for the lot, and the improvements will enhance the property and not detract from or impact the neighborhood. The addition of the garage and mudroom area will be less than 350 square feet. The home will remain a one-story Rambler. The improvements will provide additional garage and living space without drastically changing the conditions of the overall property. The home would maintain their character of the neighborhood and remain the same with the exception of the enhanced garage and mudroom. Is the proposed variance justified? Will it relieve practical difficulties that prevent reasonable use from complying with the ordinance? Staff does believe the proposed variance is reasonable. The setback of the existing garage will not change, with the sight lines remaining the same. The practical difficulty is that the property to the west actually came in later. It was built a year after the subject property and now dictates the setback that is allowed from Interlaken for that particular property. Are there circumstances that are unique to the property, not common to every similarly zoned property, that are not self-created? The unique circumstances of the non-conforming status of the home and garage limit design opportunities for adding on to the home, and the home to the west, built at a later date than the subject home, dictates the required setback, which is not a self-imposed situation for the property. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? No, the proposed addition would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The setback along Interlochen, again, will remain the same. Staff recommends approval based on the following findings. With the exception of the variance requested, it does meet all of the R1 single dwelling unit district standards. It's a relatively large lot, and the coverage is well within the ordinance requirements. It meets all of the other setbacks with the exception of the setback from Interlochen, even given the challenge they have with the limited building area, given the required setbacks. The proposal will meet the required standards of the variance because the proposed use of the property is consistent with surrounding properties, is deeper than the nonconforming setback, and has historically been provided by the existing garage. The proposed setback limits design opportunity. The intent of the ordinance is to provide adequate spacing from the street and from Interlochen. The unique circumstance is the original placement of the home relative to the neighbor's home construction that occurred at a later date. Approval of the variance is subject to the following conditions. Subject to staff approval, the survey date stamped March 30th, 2012 and revised on July 27th, 2012, and building plans and elevations date stamped August 3rd, 2012 and presented this evening. With that, I will stop and answer any questions that you may have. I will have you note that there's a number of emails that were set out in front of you from the neighbor that is directly to the west of the property, and the emails do indicate that she objects to the request. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Questions of staff, please. Commissioner Staunton?
Chris, can you put the site plan back up again? Yeah. So what I'm trying to understand is, can you explain to us why, in your report, you say the adjacent home to the west is set back 122.6 feet from Interlochen, establishing the setback for the subject property. Why does that establish the setback for the subject property?
Our ordinance has changed recently for front yard setbacks. It used to be that in order to add on or build a home on a property, if it's in a fully developed neighborhood, which most properties are in Edina, it used to be that you could average all of the front yard setbacks along the block between intersections or match the most adjacent neighbor. On a corner lot, if you have homes fronting both streets, if that's their front yard setback, you would have to maintain whatever setback they provide. And in this situation, now the ordinance has changed that there's no longer an average that's done. You simply, in a situation, have to match the adjacent neighbor's front yard setback. On a corner lot, in this situation, they're hit up on the south side and on the west side. They have to match the front yard setbacks of the adjacent neighbors.
So, and the fact that this does not encroach any further into the setback than the existing structure, it still needs a variance?
Yes, it does.
Because it's encroaching over where this 122-foot line is?
Yes, if you look at this site plan, you can see a dashed line here, and that's the front yard setback that they are supposed to maintain for any improvement along Interlochen. And probably half the house is overlapping that setback currently.
And so if it was built to the south of that second dashed line, if the homeowner was to expand the house within that box, a variance would not be required, correct?
That's correct. Now, there is a caveat to that. There's a small addition that is north of that magic line that's less than 200 square feet, because our ordinance has also changed to allow, in non-conforming situations, you can add up to 200 square feet in an area of encroachment as long as you're no closer than the closest setback. And that's what they are doing in this area. It's a 134 square foot addition. But beyond that, in order to accomplish the garage and the mudroom addition in this area, they need to request a variance. I mean, they could have gone up to 200 square feet beyond that dashed line, but their phase one addition just has this portion that overlaps that front, what is considered the front yard setback.
So, I don't see a dimension on here, but I'm trying to do some math with the other numbers. It looks like the depth of the lot from Interlochen to the adjacent property on Schaefer is 200 feet,
That's correct.
and the proposed setback is 76 feet, and we know that the existing line is 122 feet, right?
Correct. Actually,
So
the-
roughly, would the rest of it be, 78 feet? So from that dashed line to the neighboring property on Schaefer is 78 feet.
oh, from here,
From
you're,
the, from the old, from the safe dotted line, so to speak, across the 122-foot line, from there to south to the adjacent property on Schaefer, to the property line is 78 feet.
approximately, yes.
So 122 feet to Interlochen, 78 feet to the next neighbor,
Correct.
more or less.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I have two questions. If there were no houses on this block along Interlochen, what would be the front yard setback?
Actually, if there were no homes fronting Interlochen, it would be a side street setback. It would be 15 feet for living space, 20 feet for a garage opening.
Okay. And then, why is it that when this house is built first, that somebody can come in afterwards and create this unusual setback requirement on this property? I mean, this house was here first, wasn't it?
It was. It was built a year earlier approximately. There's the minimum setback for the adjacent lot to the west would have been the front yard setback of the subject home. But they can always go deeper if they wish. They'd have a minimum rear yard setback of 25 feet. This is a very deep lot. It's much deeper than the subject lot, so for whatever reason they decided to put it further back. But yes, it then does dictate the required setback of the subject property.
I mean, they could have put 6405, could have put another 20 feet deeper in the lot and create a situation where none of this house
Yes,
would
and
be
we have
within the
that.
setback.
We do have that in the city. There are certain
And
places in the
we've
city.
granted variances in those cases, too.
There have been variances granted.
Just to understand this a little bit, so the only place they can build without a variance is right in there then?
That's correct.
Okay, so they
That's the
technically
buildable-
could build a garage in the back or something, right? Or fill that in,
Yes,
however Snake would drive it.
yes, and they
Okay.
do have quite a bit of lot area to work with, so yes, they could do that.
Other questions of staff? Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
Thank you. I'm Dan Wagner. Lindsay Garrity is on a business trip, so she couldn't be here tonight. But, I think you have all the information in front of you, and Chris and her team have done just a great job helping us through the different options that we could consider, given the unique situation that we're sort of in with our property. Literally half the house is not expandable or anything that we can do with it, given the setbacks that our neighboring construction, which was a year after our house was built, created. One thing that she, given the time, I'm sure was not able to mention is that the other homes along Interlochen have a setback that's in front of the neighboring home. And there's an aerial map that is in some of your documents, I believe, where you can see that. There are actually only two homes, the two homes adjacent to our home, that have a deeper setback, and the rest actually are all in line or even in front of our existing garage line. So we did work with Chris to figure out what our options might be, and to Commissioner Platider's comment, we could build all throughout that area in the back, but we'd have no backyard, and certainly a garage would in that space would not really keep with the design and the feel of the neighborhood. It certainly would be more costly as well. We tried to find the minimal way that we could get access from the main level to a garage, and create the features that most of the other homes in the neighborhood have, which is a third stall. The home right across the street was a tear down, and we've chosen not to tear down the house and to try to keep the character of the home and just improve upon it just for a modern day growing family. So I thank you for your consideration, and regardless of how you decide, I do want to make sure that Chris and her team get thanks, because they've been great throughout the whole process. You've really got a great staff supporting you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Would anyone else wish to address this issue? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Oh, Commissioner Staunton.
Could I ask Mr. Wagner a question?
Certainly.
It looks like you're aware of the pile of paper that we received.
Yes.
I came in about 5 before 7, and I haven't had a chance to read through it. But what I can tell is that your neighbor was unable to be here this evening, and she is requesting that we continue it to our next meeting, or to some meeting. I'm wondering what your position is on that, and how, if at all, that would affect your, I don't know if you have a construction schedule set, or what, if you can just kind of fill us in on those practical details.
Sure. Well, to answer your question about the schedule, Lindsay, myself, and our 10-month-old daughter are currently living in a one-bedroom apartment waiting for the improvements to the home to be completed. Certainly, we've already started on the improvements that we did not need a variance approval for. And so those are ongoing and are expected to be completed by the end of October. The variance approval would be, the work associated with the variance approval would fit into that timeline as well. The effort is relatively small. It's 350 square feet or less of work, a 12-foot extension, still leaving 45 feet to the neighboring property line. A relatively great distance, not to mention the landscaping that currently, as you can see, I think in some of the supplemental pictures that we've provided, block the view of that garage in its current state as well as in the proposed state. And I'm happy to answer any questions about those photographs as well. Our neighbor, Miss Allen, she and I spoke when she was in town a few months ago. Apparently, she doesn't spend much time in the area, about our plans, and at the time did not express to me objection. And Chris forwarded on a note from her yesterday, which was a surprise, to be honest with you, given my interactions with her. And so I tried to reach out to her and give her more information. I didn't know how much information she had been provided. And given that she doesn't spend much time at the property, perhaps maybe thought that the impacts of the variance might be more so than, based on memory or recollection, more so than they really were. So did that answer your question? Thank you.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Are there any other questions? Any other people wish to speak to this? I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have the matter up here. I was going to mention the correspondence that we received and the request of the neighbor to delay this. I'm not inclined to look favorably upon a delay of this process since the matter's been brought by the applicant tonight. If this variance is approved, the neighbor or anybody else will have an opportunity to appeal that decision to the city council, and I think that's the redress that should be provided rather than for us to delay our proceedings. So if somebody objects to that, I'll be glad to hear your reasons.
Well, I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if I object to it, but I'm a little just uneasy about the idea of making a decision without looking at this additional information. I certainly haven't had a chance to examine it in any meaningful way. And, you know, I guess part of my question, Mr. Wagner, was, you know, we have a meeting in 2 weeks from tonight on September 5th. And I just wonder if that's, you know, if that's going to be the dimensions of the problems that that's going to create. I understand it sounds like they're living off-site and they're having some internal work done, but if we waited 2 weeks, would that be catastrophic to the project? I guess I just raised the question because I'd like to make sure we know all the information before we make a decision.
Other comments by the commission on this issue? Other discussion? Commissioner Carpenter?
I'm going to concur a little bit with what Commissioner Staunton just remarked on. And we have a little bit of a dilemma here. I, too, also have not had a chance to fully digest this, and the reason we haven't had enough time to digest it really isn't the fault of the proponent or the individual who's objecting. It's simply the fact that our process usually results in us receiving this stuff just in advance of the meeting, and there is, you know, more information here to digest than I clearly have had a chance to do as well. If there isn't a problem with delaying it a couple of weeks, I would be supportive of doing that.
Other comments? Commissioner Schroeder?
Chris, I just want to ask, when would the neighbor have received notification that this variance was going to be heard tonight?
We send notice 10 days in advance of the hearing.
So this information, all this exchange happened yesterday, today, and maybe...
The first email I received was yesterday afternoon. I think
So my point back to you is the neighbor had more than 1 day to start this exchange, and I think it's a little unfair that, I mean, if she had done it 4 days ago or 5 days ago, this information couldn't have been passed to us. It's not our concern that she waited until the very last minute to bring it to anyone's attention, including the proponent.
Commissioner Carpenter?
I don't disagree with that. And my issue isn't so much that, I mean, I agree with you. I'm a little disturbed, or maybe disturbed is too strong a word, troubled that she waited as long as she did. My problem is that for us to now sit down and digest this on an expedited basis. I mean, I'm happy to, if we want to, you know, sit here for, you know, 10 or 15 minutes and read through this stuff and think about it. But I do think that there's probably some value in pushing this over. You know, and I fully agree that, you know, that the individual objecting has a responsibility to this as well, and she may well not have performed that as she should have.
I'm going to comment that the neighbors, one of the reasons to post these things is so the people have an opportunity to present their objections. And I think it's wrong for anyone to expect that they're going to show up at the last minute and throw something at us and say, well, you know, I'm not going to be here tonight, but here's my objection, delay the meeting. I just think that's not the way an organization ought to be run. It may sound harsh to people, but that's the reason for having the notice provisions. And if the neighbor truly objects, she's got an opportunity to appeal it to the city council and present her objections at that point. I disagree with the idea that we should willy-nilly change our processes and delay meetings because somebody comes in at the last minute and says, oh, wait, I got an objection, but I can't be here tonight to present it. That seems frivolous to me. Commissioner Scherer.
Chris, I don't know whether all of the exchange that you've had has been by email, but just as a detail that would be important, Ms. Allen, if this, have you talked to her? I mean, if this were delayed one meeting, would she for sure be there? She's clearly someone who's out of town a great deal.
I don't know what her schedule is.
Okay.
I
So we have no way to know, even if we did delay it, whether she could attend.
In terms of which meeting, I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Forrest?
Well, there's also the statement, granted it's from the proponent, that they had a number of conversations about the plans for the 2 weeks she was in town, so that sets the date back a little bit more. She at least was aware that there was something going on which could have alerted her to follow any city announcements more closely.
Mr. Staunton?
Well, you know, 10 days written notice in the posting if she's not in town, I can certainly see how that could have run to the last minute. I'm not concerned about whether she'll be here at a future meeting. I'm concerned that I have a chance to look at whatever she submitted before I make a decision. And I don't think, you know, she can appeal it and she could take it up to the council. I'd just like to make a decision based on the complete information. And, you know, part of the advantage of us meeting twice monthly instead of once a month is that it isn't a long delay if we continue these things to the next meeting. So just to at least get this issue behind us, I'll make a motion to continue this to the September 5 meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion to continue this to the September 5 meeting. Carrie, did you have something?
Just for a quick clarification, the next meeting is September 12th.
Do you wish to amend your motion?
No, I'm not. I think the principle is the same. So I will not amend my motion, except to say to September 12th.
That was my question. Your motion is to delay this until September 12th.
Correct, until our next meeting.
Is there a second to that?
I thought there was.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded at least twice now that we delay this to the next meeting, which is September 12th. Is there further discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to be clear, even if the neighbor were here, she would not be allowed to speak at this point. We've closed the public hearing. So all we would have is the information, the exchange between the two. There would be no chance to ask more questions, or do we get to do that? Do we allow the neighbor to come back up and ask questions of us on how we're interpreting the information that's been provided?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Staunton.
I'm fine with that. I just want to read what she submitted. And I don't, so it doesn't matter to me whether she's here at the next meeting or not. I just feel like I don't, you know, we have information in front of us and I haven't had a chance to read it. And we don't have hard and fast rules about people submitting things anytime before the meeting. We get things on our table all the time. This happens to be a lot longer than anything else we've ever received, but.
Other discussion on the motion? It's been moved to delay this, or I suppose, delay this until the next meeting, which is September 12th. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
I think the motion fails. Is there, what is your preference regarding the request for the variance? Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion.
Commissioner Platter,
I'd make a motion to approve the variances as noted in the staff report,
with the conditions as noted therein.
with the conditions there
Second.
noted.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the variance. Is there further discussion on this motion? Commissioner Staunton?
So I think I'm going to vote against this, but I want Mr. Wagner to know that it is not because on the merits of what I've read, I think it should be denied. It's only because I don't feel like I've had a chance to review all the information. On the merits that are in front of me, at least, it seems like a very easy call because it's no further than what the building was originally. You've got, you've got a building that was there prior to the next door building. the lot is less than half the depth buildable because of this rule. So I think it really is a harsh imposition on Mr. Wagner and his wife and family. And so my inclination is to support the variance, but not being able to review all of the information, I'll have to vote against it.
Other discussion? I think we have an interesting situation in the city that with corner lots and the fixing of the lot setbacks for a corner house. My home is on a corner lot, and we're at the one corner of the lot because there's the rear yard setback, there's the front yard setback, and then there's the side yard, which is established by all the other people on the side street. And this one in particular, where this house was there first, and then as Chris confirmed, someone could come in this particular situation, have built a house beyond this lot's rear lot line, and thus created no space for a home on this particular lot, which is unusual to say the least. Other discussion? Been moved and seconded to approve the variance. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Very good. The motion on the variance has been approved. I will suggest that there is an appeal process to the City Council, so before you break ground, you might want to wait until that appeal process is through. The next item on the public hearing agenda is a lot area variance for Mike and Matt Knott at 3928 49th Street West in Edina. Chris?
Thank you. The subject property is located just north of 49th Street. It is a double dwelling unit lot. It is located right here. It is a 12,468 square foot lot developed with a double dwelling unit. It currently is a rambler. You can see that there is an attached garage to the east, on the east side, and then there's also a driveway that's coming along the west side with the tuck-under garage for the second unit. There are a variety of doubles along the north and south side of 49th Street. There's also some single-family homes. There's one directly adjacent to the east. There's also one across the street, sort of kitty corner across the street, and then there's some doubles directly across the street and to the west of the subject property. This is a photograph of the existing structure, and here's a survey of the existing property with the existing structure located on it. The property owner would like to tear down the existing double and replace it with a new double dwelling unit. There is a provision in the single dwelling unit ordinance that allows non-conforming lots to be built on that are not conforming to our current standards of a width of 75 feet by 120 by 9,000 square feet. So there are plenty of lots in the east side of Edina, actually in this neighborhood, that are single dwelling lots that can be torn down and rebuilt on without having to get a variance. However, that non-conforming provision does not specifically apply to a double dwelling unit lot, and the minimum lot area for a double dwelling unit is 15,000 square feet. This property is 12,468 square feet. It was developed with a double in 1954. It does predate our current ordinance in terms of lot area requirements. There are a number of doubles over on the west side of Edina. Most of those lots are pretty generous. They're more than 15,000 square feet. The ones along France Avenue, Valley View as well, are larger lots. But this is a small pocket of some smaller double lots. Some are even less than this particular lot. Some are more. They do vary in size. This shows you the building footprint overlaid the existing footprint, and what you'll notice is the area is roughly the same for the building footprint. The existing footprint, according to our assessing records, is about a little less than 23% of the lot. The new building will be about 23.5% of the lot. They did not want to build up the maximum 25% because they did want to reserve some area in order to accomplish a larger deck. So really the footprint from what's existing there and what they're proposing will be relatively the same. It will be a two-story structure, which is allowed in the R2 zoning district. It will meet all of the setback and height requirements. This would be the front elevation, the two side elevations, and it is a walkout in the lower level. From the front, if you measure from grade to the top of the ridge, it will be under 30 feet. So the drawing may be a little bit hard to read. There aren't any dimensions on it, but it's not terribly tall for a two-story structure. The ordinance does require a minimum 15,000 square feet per double dwelling unit. This one will be a two-story. This is a floor plan of the first floor and then also of the second floor. Both units have to provide a minimum two-car garage, which you can see on the main floor does end up eating up quite a bit of the allowable building area of the lot. That was quite a challenge for them. They were pretty disappointed when I said I don't think that the Planning Commission would be sympathetic to a lot coverage variance, so they did try very hard to work within those requirements. The primary issue is the proposed development reasonable for the site? Staff believes the permitted use in the R2 double dwelling unit district complies with all the requirements with the exception of lot area. The lot predates our current requirements. The homes are appropriate in size and scale for the lot, and the improvements will enhance the property. The property is in an existing non-conforming lot that has always been developed with a double dwelling unit, and the homes are new two-story walkouts with attached two-car garages that should complement the character of the neighborhood. There has been one other rebuild that also is a two-story with a tuck-under garage. I think that's how they kind of solved the problem with coverage for those garages. And that's across the street and to the west. There haven't been really any other improvements along the block, although I guess I would anticipate that that might occur, and we might have to see some additional variances for some of the lots that kind of dip below that 15,000 square foot requirement. Will the property request, does it have practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use of the property? Staff believes that the proposed variance is reasonable given that historically the existing double home has been on a lot that is less than the required 15,000 square feet. The practical difficulty for the subject property is that the ordinance was changed regarding minimum lot size for the double unit lot. It's not untypical, again, to see a lot of the R1 lots in the neighborhood that are below the minimum requirements that we require for the R1 district. Are there circumstances that are unique to the property, not common to every similarly zoned property, that are not self-created? A unique circumstance is the existing property predates the ordinance, and it certainly was not self-created. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? The proposed homes will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The new twin homes will complement the existing neighborhood homes. Approval of the variance allows continued reasonable use of the property. I did take a look at how large the homes are in terms of coverage were on the north and south side just for the doubles. Most of the homes, well, the homes that are doubles along the north side, they vary anywhere between 17 to roughly 23%. On the south side, the lots are a little bit different in area, and they do vary between 17 and 25% lot coverage. The 25% lot coverage was that newer double that's further to the west. So the little over 23.5% that they're proposing is right within the realm of what's occurring on both sides of the block. Staff recommends approval based upon the findings that, with the exception of the variance requested, the proposal would meet all the required standards. The proposer would meet the required standards for a variance because the proposed use of the property is consistent with existing conditions and is reasonable. The imposed lot area does not allow redevelopment of the property without the benefit of a variance. or actually a zone change. The only zone change that they could seek, I would assume, would be to a single dwelling unit district. But they wouldn't be able to rebuild on a double lot that's currently zoned R2 without the benefit of a variance. Approval of the variance is subject to the following conditions. The survey date stamped August 9th, 2012, and the building plans and elevations date stamped August 9th, 2012 that were included in your packet and presented tonight. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Questions of staff? Commissioner Platter.
Hey, Chris, I have two questions. Maybe it was in here and I missed it, but do you know what the existing square foot and the proposed square foot of the house is?
Oh, in terms of both levels?
Well,
Or
yeah,
the
just
footprint
just
is-
overall.
I know, I think that...
Along with it, the FAR wouldn't necessarily apply its lot coverage, right?
Yeah, I don't have the FAR. The existing is a Rambler, and that was at about 2870 square feet, and then I was just looking at the footprint of the new house. I wasn't looking at the second floor on it. And it's just a bit over, if you looked at the site plan, it did impose the new over the old, and it's a bit larger, but not much larger than what's there right now.
That'd be nice to know. Okay.
Commissioner Forrest.
If this were excuse me, if this were built on as an R1 property, would they be allowed 30% lot coverage?
No, they would be allowed 25% of a 15,000 square foot lot, so
Okay.
basically the mass would be the same, but it is zoned R2 and they cannot build a single
Right.
dwelling unit on it. They're zoned R2 and that's what's a permitted use.
Now, just some of the smaller R1 lots, are they allowed 30% coverage though?
They're allowed 30% or 2,250, whichever is less, but yes.
But this wouldn't if it were R1? Because,
It's larger than 9,000 square feet, so
okay,
no.
that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Commissioner Staunton.
So the existing use is a double, correct?
Correct.
And the existing structure complies is the existing structure non-conforming?
No, it's conforming.
So it's really the use. They're proposing to use it for a two-family.
It's currently a two-family or two double dwelling unit, and they're proposing a double dwelling unit. So the use is consistent with the existing use right now. It's the lot area that is not consistent with what our minimum lot area requires for a double if it were to be platted today.
So it's non-conforming now.
The lot is non-conforming. The use as a double is permitted.
And in the R2 zone, are people permitted to build a single-family dwelling in an R2 zone?
No.
So you couldn't do a
Right.
single. You have to do a double.
Correct. You have to rebuild with a double.
Absent a rezoning.
They'd have to rezone it to R1.
And if they could replace this. So are we concluding that because it's expanding the size of the structure that it needs a variance?
Well, we have a provision that allows you to rebuild in an R1 zone if the property, if you have a house on it, you remove it and you're going to rebuild on it. If the lot area does not meet our particular width, depth, or lot area requirements, if they don't meet those minimums, does not say that for R2. So for them to rebuild on it, it's simply a matter of the lot area.
So the same situation in an R1, we wouldn't even require a variance.
That's correct. There is specific language in the ordinance addressing non-conforming single dwelling unit lots. There is not the same language for an R2 lot.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Thank you, Chris. Is the applicant here, do they wish to make a presentation or comments? You're here, but you choose to remain silent, is that it? Okay. Very well. Does
That
anyone
makes
else
you
wish
feel
to
really
address
foolish, doesn't
this issue? Yes. Please come forward to the podium. On the side here, sir. Yeah, would you come to this over here? Yeah. One more. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm David Nyball. I own the property, let's see, just to the west there, and lived in Edina a long time, for 22 years. And I just was wondering now if this new building will be built any closer to my building, any closer, the lot line, will this building be extended any, let's see, it'd be the direction west, I guess. I was wondering about that, please. Let's see.
Okay. We'll have somebody answer that question. Do you have any other comments?
No, I hope this proposed building will still be in the character of the neighborhood. We like our neighborhood, so that it won't be. I was wondering too, this is one thing, yes, will this building be built any farther in the lot line than the present building? Let's see, that would be, try my directions, that would be, I wonder, would it be built any farther? Let's see, that would be north, towards the backyard. I was just wondering if it would be any larger that way, and I was just wondering, and then if it'd be built any farther to the west area.
This is the existing house, so it'll be further away. This is about 4 feet, this will be 10 feet. And then this is the back wall of the garage. It's like a little bay window. It'll be a little bit further back. But this is the existing back wall in the garage.
But listen, let's see, which side is west?
This is west
Yeah,
here.
okay,
And you're east, right?
Yeah, north, south. So then it would be
10 feet on the west side.
yeah. Is this dots, is it present?
This is the existing house.
Yeah.
And then this is the proposed house. So it's roughly in the same, it's getting a little further away on the east side, just a little bit closer with this bump out on the west side, and then about even with the back wall of the garage. You can keep that if you want.
Can I? Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address this issue? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing and move to discussion here. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Comments from the commission? Commissioner Scherer.
Yes, at first I spent a little time, as the conversation with Commissioner Staunton went, trying to understand the implications in an R1 and an R2 district of what opportunity the owner has to build or rebuild. Once I had grasped that, my opinion became, really, since we have no option other than to redevelop it as a double, and since there are no other setback or variance requests that are attached to this, I will vote to approve.
Other comments? Commissioner Staunton?
Couldn't have said it better myself. I'll move approval per the staff report.
Is there a second? I have one comment to make. I appreciate the fact, although you do extend, it looks like another couple feet towards the west, which is another double home, duplex. On the side that's next to the single-family dwelling, you've moved back further away from that home, and I think that's something that ought to be noted for the record. Other discussion?
Can I
Commissioner
just ask that my motion be amended to include a finding that a single-family dwelling is not permitted in this zone?
Okay.
I would concur.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the variance with the added notation that a single-family dwelling would not be permitted on this property. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The variance is granted, subject to those conditions. Again, as with the previous variance, there is an appeal period, so make sure you don't break ground until the appeal period is passed. Otherwise, go forth and build. The next item on the public hearing agenda is conditional use permit for Paul and Kristen Commerce at 4710 Golf Terrace in Edina. Chris?
Thank you. Subject property is located on the north side of Golf Terrace and is just south of the Edina Country Club. The property owners, Paul and Kristen Commerce, are requesting a conditional use permit to construct a new home at 4710 Golf Terrace, which is located approximately there. It is currently a Rambler with an attached two-car garage. The garage is on the west side. A conditional use permit is being requested for the subject property to allow the first floor elevation of the new home to exceed the 1-foot minimum requirement. This is a survey of the existing home. The existing home shows that the first floor elevation is at 902.6 feet. The new first floor elevation will be at 905.8 feet. This is a footprint of the proposed home. It's actually getting much further away from the westerly property boundary. It will be getting closer to the easterly property boundary. The home, however, was designed so that the lower portions of the home would be on either side with the highest portion of the house centered to try to mitigate any height impact on the adjacent properties. The maximum allowed increase without a conditional use permit for the first floor would be 903.6 feet. The new first floor is proposed to be 2.2 feet over the 1 foot allowed by city code in order to reasonably protect the lower level of the new dwelling from groundwater. A report of geotechnical exploration dated July 24, 2012 from Geoengineering Consultants, Inc. regarding groundwater levels, indicates that groundwater measured from a grade at 897.7 to a level of 892 feet with the recommended lowest floor elevation of at least 894 to 895 feet. They are requesting an increase in the allowable first floor elevation by 2.2 feet, which would raise the first floor 3.2 feet higher than what's existing there. The proposed basement would be at 895. The existing first floor is at 902.6 with the proposed first floor at 905.8. This is the elevation of the front of the house, and as was pointed out with the site plan of the new home, the lower portion of the homes are going to be on either side with the tallest portion of the home centered. This gives you a little more detail on that. There would be 9-foot ceilings in the basement, starting at that 895 basement elevation, and then they would have modern floor trusses, bringing the first floor elevation to this point, and then from grade to the top of the ridge, they're proposing the mid portion of the house to be 31 feet tall, and then from top of floor to the top of the ridge, or the middle of the roof would be 30 feet. On the side, towards the east, the height of the ridge would be 24 feet, and I'm estimating that on the west side it would probably be around 26 feet, but most of the garage that would be facing, well, the garage facing westerly would have a sloped portion of roof facing the west side yard, so you wouldn't have that upper level adjacent to that westerly lot line, and they're also providing a much deeper setback on that side. This is the east elevation as proposed, and you'll notice there would be a lower section of the home closer on the east side, and then on the west side you have the garage. It would be a side-loading garage with a lower portion of the home on the west side, middle of the house, the tallest portion of the house. This is the rear elevation of the house. As proposed, as you would see from Edina Country Club, this would be the adjacent home directly to the east, and that home has been rebuilt. And then there's a home directly to the west at 4800 Golf Terrace. Conditional use permit requires that the Planning Commission not recommend approval for a conditional use permit unless it finds the establishment does not have an undue adverse impact on government facilities, utility services, or existing or proposed improvements. The replacement of a single dwelling unit would not have any adverse impact. That it will generate traffic within the capacity of the streets, and again, there will be no change to that. That it does not have an undue adverse impact on public health, safety, or welfare. There will be no change to that as well. Will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of other property in the vicinity. It should also not do that. Conforms to the applicable restrictions and special conditions of the district in which it is located. The new home will meet all of the applicable zoning ordinance requirements with the exception of the first floor elevation, and that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's a single dwelling unit home which is consistent with the low density residential land use designated in the comprehensive plan. Additional conditions require that in order for a single dwelling unit just home to be torn down and to have the first floor elevation be increased by more than 1 foot, it must meet 2 of the following 4 conditions. That the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to elevate the lowest level of the dwelling unit to an elevation of 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. That the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion. That the first floor elevation may be increased to the extent necessary to allow the new building to meet state building code. And an increase in the first floor elevation will only be permitted if the new structure or addition fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. And the number 4 condition that I just read is must be met along with one of those 3 conditions. Condition 2 and 4 apply to this application and to the proposed new home. The proposed home would have a low floor elevation of 895. The applicant would like the new home to have a 9-foot ceiling height. 8 to 9 foot basement ceiling heights within the single family homes in Edina is typical for new construction. We have granted conditional use permits to allow 8.5 to 9 foot ceiling heights in the past. The proposed new home would fit the character of the neighborhood. There are some photographs of some of the homes along the street, which include homes that are 2-story homes. There are some ramblers, 1.5-story homes, 2-story homes. The character of the neighborhood is that there's a variety of different housing styles with a mixture of single floor, 2-floor homes. And these are just some examples of the homes along the street. The primary issue is the proposed new home with a first floor elevation 3.2 feet higher than the existing home, reasonable for the site, and again, it's 2.2 feet higher than what is allowed. Staff believes the proposal is reasonable for 4 reasons. The proposal meets the conditional use permits findings as previously indicated. The proposal meets all minimum zoning standards. Because of groundwater issues, the basement of the new home must be elevated to a minimum recommended height of 894 to 895. The new first floor height will be at 905.8, the basement providing 9-foot ceiling heights. A basement with 9-foot ceiling is considered reasonable in the city and for new construction. The proposed new home is in character with the neighborhood as indicated with those photographs, and the home is similar to other homes constructed within the general area. Staff recommends that the approval of the conditional use permit for a new home at 4710 Golf Terrace. The conditional use permit allows the new home They have a first floor elevation of 905.8 feet, which is 3.2 feet above the first floor existing elevation and 2.2 feet above the first floor height allowed by ordinance. The site should be developed and maintained in conformance with the following plans: a survey date stamped July 25th, 2012, and building plans and elevations date stamped July 25th, 2012. Submit a copy of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and final grading and drainage plans are subject to review and approval by the city engineer. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Chris, I got a couple of questions. I would agree that the plans meet the condition 4, which is the character of the neighborhood. I do have some questions about condition 2, elevate the first floor as reasonably necessary to avoid the water. We have in the packet a report directed to the builder from a water engineer, I guess, who did some readings on the property to determine the level. First question is this: when we do a redevelopment or anything and there's traffic studies involved, the city pays for, or the city provides an independent traffic engineer to do those studies. Should the city not, and this may be a rhetorical question, should the city not, in cases like this, provide an independent geoengineer to make the readings concerning water levels? And despite the fact that it's a rhetorical question, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I think if it became part of the ordinance, we certainly could. I guess it just depends upon who pays for it. The city has to pay for it, or if the applicant pays for it, or... but you're right. In other instances with other applications, the city does have a traffic engineer, independent, and as part of the ordinance, I think that is a possibility.
Okay. Next question, and I may have missed it. You said that the existing basement, or the new basement, is going to be at 895 feet.
That's correct.
What is the level of the existing basement?
The existing basement, and that information came in a little bit later, is 893.8.
893.8.
So there's a 1.2 foot difference between the proposed basement elevation and the existing basement elevation.
And then finally, my question or comment is that the engineer's report says that the lowest floor elevation should be at least 894 to 895 feet. They are requesting 895. If it was set at 894, which would be above the existing basement, then instead of a 2.2 foot adjustment, we would only need a 1.2 foot adjustment. Am I reading those numbers and everything correctly?
I think you are.
Okay. Other questions?
You could go a little further. If they didn't want a 9-foot basement, we wouldn't even be talking about this. In addition to the 1 extra foot.
That's true. Commissioner Scherer?
Chris, do we know what the front door elevations are of any of the adjacent homes on the block?
On the block, no. I mean, not offhand.
We don't have a picture of this home in relation to any of the others. We don't have any way of putting that in perspective.
We don't have, like similar to what the Heritage Preservation Board does in terms of their roof heights. No, we don't.
It's
have
lower
that.
than that one, and it's higher than the one on the other side.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
it'll
getting
be
to.
it'll be actually higher, 1 foot higher, I believe, than this home, and the one to the west, it will be even
It'll
higher.
be higher than both of them.
Pardon me? Yes.
Higher than both of them.
Yes. It'll be higher than both of them. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Staunton?
Chris, what is the height limit in this zone?
It's 35 feet, and then you can go 1 inch per foot, depending upon the lot width.
And I'm really interested in the highest portion. If you turn back to that the elevation drawing that has the annotated heights on it.
Oh, sure.
So that there's a couple of arrows that show, one shows 30 feet from the top of the floor and the other's 31 to grade. So is it 35 feet at that point?
They would have to maintain a maximum height of 35 feet, and they're showing 31, but, you know, there would be a grade change, obviously, if they're moving the floor up 2.2 feet higher than the 1 foot that we allow, you know, assuming there's going to be a couple feet, they'll have to put the grade up.
Okay,
So
thank
that
you.
it would actually be 33 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Platter?
Chris, I just wanted to ask a question, maybe it's clarification. On page 4, it says the proposed new home would have a low floor elevation of 893.8. That's in the middle of the page.
I'm sorry, that's the existing basement. The proposed is 895.
So that's existing and...
Existing's at 893.8, and the new first floor, or basement elevation is at 895. Existing first floor is 902.6. Proposed first floor is 905.8. Just to clarify that.
Do you know why, kind of that question, do you know why the applicant wants to go up a foot from the 894, which is essentially where it is today?
I don't.
Because that still fits in the...
I think the applicant would
water
probably
report.
address that,
Okay.
perhaps.
Other questions to staff? Jeff, did you have a question? Okay. Thank you, Chris. Opportunity for the applicant to comment.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the report, and thank you for considering our...
We'll have to get the side.
Thank you. But yeah, thanks, Chris, for the report, and thanks the Planning Commission for considering this application. My name is Scott Busen with Great Neighborhood Homes. I live at 4615 Wooddale here with Paul Commerce. Our client, Paul and Kristen Commerce, are excited about building on Gulf Terrace. They lived in Edina for...
We've been here for about 18 years. We live on Brookview on the east side of Edina for 15 years, and we built a home over on Circle West in Hilldale in 2007. So we've decided we engaged with Scott a couple years ago, and we missed the eastern side of Edina, and we found this lot that we thought fit our needs perfect, and so we decided to move forward with it. And I guess Scott has some information, maybe that he's better at it than I would be at discussing why we need to bring it up where we need to.
So yeah, just to add on to what Chris said, a couple more things that Commerce did as far as designing a house to really fit the neighborhood. The home to the east is at 38 feet, so we're below that home to the east. We really, if you went by the site, you'd notice how from the house to the west, the proposed home, and then the house to the east, the grade stair steps up. So we're really looking at, and we measured the heights of the two homes on either side, we're really sort of splitting the difference between those two as far as their height. So if you see the finished home, there's going to be a gradual increase, kind of connecting the dots, so to speak, between the two homes. The other thing that the Commerce did a great job of was designing the home so not only the sides, all four sides of the home are attractive. Oftentimes the rear of the home or the sides kind of get the second, just sort of end up being what they are. But they really did a great job of designing all four sides. So, from the street, from the golf course, both sides of the house is very presentable. In addition, if you looked at the site plan, you saw how not only was the middle of the home, the highest point that it cascaded down from there, but in addition, the furthest back penetration of the home towards the rear setback, the furthest point is in the middle. So if you stood on either Honeywells on the west or Birds on the right and looked through, they've got the the best angle still of views, kind of down, towards the course or the neighbor's yard. So I don't think anybody, and we haven't had complaints, we had a neighbor meeting about it, but everybody's really pleased with the plan. I think it's, one of those plans that really addresses all the issues up front as far as not having a minimal impact on the neighborhood. So I think it really will enhance Golf Terrace when it's built. And then I can add one little thing to your comment about the water surveying that's done. I mean, the way they do it is we hired a licensed engineer firm who's trained in the practices of checking the water table, and they use a piezometer, which is a tube that go down. It's got a lock on it. So there's definitely, they follow the guidelines of engineering, and I think, if someone would fund that, it'd be great. We'd love to have someone else do that. But they do, I think when I look at what they do, it's probably a similar process to what the city employed engineer would do. So yeah, do you have any more questions about the project or any other questions?
Questions of the applicant? Commissioner Platter.
Why aren't you down at
894.
894?
Yeah, we want to be above the water table.
The report says you can start at 894.
Yep. He said 2 to 3 feet is what he said. So you could 894 to 895. So there's a couple things. First of all, as a builder, I've got liability. Okay, so we're always interested in building on high ground. So we're always going to err on the side of being conservative and getting the house as high as it can be above the water table. If you look at the FHA requirements for building a new home, they require a low floor to be 4 feet above water table. So, I think we could be even more conservative if we followed their guidelines for being above the water table. So I think, where we're at, with the 2 feet is a good place to be. The existing home that's there, sump pump runs pretty much constantly. We're in between. We've got a pond on the course to the south, and across the street is Lake Harvey. So, at some point there's a connected, wet area there. And in addition, the home, we did soil borings there. The home that's existing there now is on peat. So it is pretty much a peat bog that we're building on. So we will be having to put in helical pilings, which we'll put in about 90 helical screw pilings throughout the foundation to build that table, so to speak, for us to put the house on the table. So in light of all that, as a builder, I'm recommending to the client that, a 2 feet, I don't think we should go any lower than that, with all the conditions on the site. There's no city, other than floodplain, where the city typically wants to be 2 feet above. Floodplain's a similar comparison that's on ordinance, but there's no ordinance that says, what 1 or 2 feet above. It's really following the engineer report, looking at what FHA says about low floor elevation, and making what I feel is a conservative yet still somewhat aggressive basement height. I mean, being that we're only 1.2 feet above the old basement, and that sump pump's running, all the time, I think we're pretty much, in the right balance of trying to get the house to fit in with all the city zoning, and then keeping it high and dry for the owners.
It's another one. You're increasing the impervious surface here. What are you doing with drainage to the, I believe it's west side, the garage side? Looks like right now anything would go down and end up in the neighbor's yard, and maybe that's, at least by the elevations I read, are you redirecting anything there? Are you putting a swale in on that side?
So what we will do with the drainage is, when we do
It also says proposed drive on that side?
Yes.
What's that about?
So, as Chris said, the home is much further away from the house to the west than the current home is, so it's a lesser impact, and the current house is there. We're a little bit closer to the house to the east, but the house to the east has their garage facing us, so that's the one we think, as far as least amount of impact, let's be closer to that, because it's just their garage, it's not really their views. So we will have a garage facing west that will back out from, to access Golf Terrace on the west side. And then as far as the drainage, ask your question about the drainage. if we look at the survey, we turn in a permit to the city, we're required to have a drainage plan. So this property here, the backyard drains, there's a pond on the, just beyond the fence on the golf course, that there's a large area that drains into there. This is the lowest, this backyard, that pond is like the lowest point for 3 houses on either side. So the water in the backyard will drain to that pond, but then everything else from the house forward will drain in a swale, swales between the 2 homes to Gulf Terrace, or to, I believe there's a storm drain that was installed when they redid the street. So we can stub into the storm drain near the street for that. So pretty much from the back of the house to that pond, it'll go to that pond, and then on either side it'll run away from the home. Obviously as much of it as possible will percolate into our yard, because it's a 140-foot lot, it's a big property. Being the fact that we're not anywhere near the max as far as lot coverage for this site, and then we've got a lot of good percolation capability in the front yard too. But nothing will go on the neighbor's yard.
Well, it just looks like it slopes 7 feet down on that side, so I'm still trying to understand. And the neighbors is at the same elevation, 898 there, so trying to understand how it's not going to go on that property.
Well, if you look at basically we're at about 898, and there's about an 898 elevation that kind of goes from the point of the west neighbor's house into our property. Then it gets down to about 897 as you move on the lot line towards Gulf Terrace. So the slope is towards Gulf Terrace. So what we will do is, obviously, we're building a new home. The previous home was built quite a while ago. We will make that swale more aggressive. Because every home we build, we always have a much more aggressive swale. I mean, building code requires 6-inch drop in 10 feet, and I don't think they even have it there now. So yeah, we'll definitely make that.
If you could correct that on the plans and submit it, that'd be great.
Yep. Yeah, we will for sure on the permit application.
Other questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Schroeder?
In the email provided by your engineer, it noted that after a final water level reading, we can provide more specific recommendations. We don't have access to those more specific recommendations.
Yeah, it came after the application date. It came in a little bit higher, after about 2-week reading, about 2 inches higher than it was before. I mean, water tables are seasonal. They're never going to be the same every time you read them. But I think, looking at, the fact that we went through heavy rains in May and then it kind of settled down a little bit, we're probably more equilibrium than we were in May. So,
thank you.
Other questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to comment on this issue? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, comments, discussion among the commission. Commissioner Scherer.
I should probably start with a little bit of a disclaimer. One of my favorite streets in Edina, I sold the house at 4505 last December. And I grew up in that house, so I know, I think, every house on the street. I think it's a beautiful design. I think it's lovely, and it's one of the houses that was an infill house on a side lot that it's replacing, that was built in the 50s, not the 30s or 40s, so I think it will enhance the neighborhood a lot. I would share with the commission, and I guess I would just make for public comment, that I have begun to be concerned about the number of times that we're starting to hear, it's just peaking up a little bit, the ground level discussion as a way of elevating the front level of a home. If you know Gulf Terrace, you know that it's built on peat and clay. There isn't a house on that street from Wooddale back that hasn't had water problems periodically over time. There are a lot of sump pumps in that area. There's been a lot of excavating and drain tile put around houses in that area. The one I sold had both, and it probably is going to have some more with the next purchaser who knew about the issues. I've seen carpet hauled out of every house on the street periodically, out of basements during bad water periods of time. And I am concerned, I want to echo the chair's comment about whether we should be looking at our code going forward about who should be doing these surveys and really being clear about what our standards are. Homes that are very near the creek or a large water source, that's one thing. But I don't think we really want to be going through this discussion about every home in every neighborhood where there is some sort of a residual water problem when we rebuild a house. I don't. If we intend to have 9-foot ceilings in every basement, if we intend to survey for water in numerous areas that are not necessarily near other water, I think we need to codify that and we need to be clear about it going forward. So I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to make those comments and concur with the chairman's previous observation.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Schroeder?
I want to kind of add on to that, I guess, a little bit. When I look at these elevations relative to groundwater, I know that there has to be, in the recommendation that's made, to set the lowest floor elevation at 2 to 3 feet above the water level. Every engineer I know would apply some engineering factor of safety to that. We don't have the report that tells us what that is, so when you get to 3, I would assume that 2 would be safe, even with the engineering factor of safety applied. Mr. Busen also said that he would be responsible to the homeowner and make certain that the floor elevation was above what was required, so he pushed it to 893. It seems like we're getting factor of safety applied upon factor of safety. I also look at it when we look at the basement ceiling elevation, or base ceiling height being 9 feet, that the code is 7. Chris's staff report says that 9s are common, but 8s are, I would assume, acceptable. If we were to use the 2-foot elevation of the lowest floor elevation, which is within the recommendations provided by their geotechnical engineer, there's I don't know if he's a geotechnical engineer, a civil engineer, and an 8-foot basement, as I mentioned to the chair at the beginning, we wouldn't even be talking about this. They would be fractionally under the 1-foot elevation change. And I'm hard pressed to find a reason to apply this, given to approve this, given those factors.
Other comments? Commissioner Carpenter?
I'm just going to say generally that I have a tendency to feel more and more concerned about trying to stay away from water level issues, and we have worked with on an ordinance from an ordinance perspective, and maybe that hasn't been sufficiently successful to deal with some of those issues. Maybe another ordinance or revised ordinance would be helpful along those lines. And I, quite frankly, I like the idea of at least providing some sort of reasonable buffer, so we're not drawing the line as a matter of inches above the water table. And beyond that, I don't really have anything to add other than just the general concern that we not cut the corners so tightly that we actually start creating problems for people. Now, 1 or 2 feet, someplace in there is probably a reasonable solution. 2 or 3 feet, someplace in there is probably, you're probably exceeding what's appropriate. But that's a concern I guess I would have.
Mr. Staunton?
The more we do these, and we seem to be doing them relatively frequently, I think it's important to always remember what we're after here. Originally, this 1 foot above the finished floor was designed to, was our modest way to try and tackle the McMansion issue, where a house would be built up and create an even more dramatic kind of imposition on a neighboring modest home. And this was then the second iteration when somebody came in with water problems and said, you can't not let me build up, otherwise I'm going to have a flooded basement all the time. So when I look at these, I want to think, I'm kind of thinking about all these technical, mathematical calculations that we have to do about whether it's 1 foot or 2 foot or 3 foot. But I'm also mindful of the character of the neighborhood. And in fact, those are the two criteria we're supposed to apply. First, we're supposed to ask whether it's being elevated to a place to an extent necessary to, quote, reasonably protect the dwelling. And then secondly, we're supposed to ask whether it fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. And certainly I'll defer to Commissioner Shearer's longstanding experience in the neighborhood in terms of the fitting the neighborhood in mass and scale. It seems like it fits right in. It certainly, even if you measured from the existing finished first floor, it would still meet the height limits in our zoning code. It might be 33 feet, or it might be 34 feet instead of 30 feet. So I'm not too alarmed. I don't want to create a hard and fast rule that says if you meet the height limit that I don't care about this adjustment, because there are times when you'll meet the height limit, but it'll be grossly out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood. So, when I look at the language about reasonably protect, I'm persuaded by Mr. Buson's comments that, look, why not be safe? And in a house of this magnitude, to have a 9-foot basement instead of an 8-foot basement, if you can still fit within the height limits and you still fit within the mass and scale of the neighborhood, I'm not distressed by that. So I'd be in favor of granting the CUP.
May I ask you a question about that? The current proposal is raise the basement to 895, and with a 9-foot ceiling, that brings the first floor elevation to 905.8. Now, is that what you're comfortable with, or are you comfortable with 895 on the basement and maybe an 8-foot ceiling bringing the first level to 904?
No, I'm comfortable with what they're proposing.
Okay. Commissioner Schroeder?
I want to just challenge a little bit the idea of the massing. I sat on the massing task force, and it was hard to deal with these issues because of the variability in houses and neighborhoods across our city. And I think one of the things we came to is that as we looked at the 1 foot above the existing floor elevation, is recognizing the way people perceive homes, that it's not all about how tall they are relative to grade, but it's actually where the first floor is. And if you compare this proposed house with a floor elevation, first floor elevation 905.8, it would appear to be 3.2 feet higher than what exists out there today, which would make it nearly 2 feet higher than the house to the east and more than 3 feet higher than the house to the west. So part of massing is part of the change that people should anticipate is not just the overall height, but the height of the first floor and how the house either sits into the topography or looms over the lot. And I think that the 3.2 feet rise over the existing floor elevation seems to be a lot to me, even with the size of this house. To me, that 3.2 is 10% of the height of the structure of the house. I think we're dramatically changing the character of this house on this lot relative to the neighborhood.
Commissioner Forrest?
Well, whereas Commissioner Staunton focused on the words, to reasonably protect the dwelling, what I see in every condition other than 4 is to the extent necessary. And it's to either reasonably protect it or to fall within our code. And I don't think a 9-foot ceiling is the extent that's necessary. So,
Commissioner Platter?
I was just saying I agree with Commissioner Schroeder, and just another comment. It seems like this rule has been being used as a crutch to get another foot or two and make the new house first floor elevation just taller than the other ones. I don't know if it's completely on purpose, but everyone that comes through has that exact situation where they are getting the 2 to 3 foot height above the other ones. And to, the massing point, it does look a lot bigger because of where that first floor is at those.
Mr. Carpenter?
Just to clarify, are you making those comments in the context of other developments where the water table issues have been expressed as a concern, or separate and apart from that?
With the water table one, they've always asked for the extra 2 or 3 feet, citing the water table as the purpose, but then going, in my mind, above and beyond all those times than what they could build to within the other ordinance pieces.
Mr. Staunton?
I don't see the data on the finished first floor on the 2 neighboring properties. Do we have that on the? Is it on the survey?
904 and
Thank
902.
you.
Mr. Chair, can I just add one
Mr.
more
Schroeder,
comment?
yes.
I don't want to be seen as like not being in favor of encouraging attractive homes in attractive neighborhoods, but I will point out that, as I did before, that if they use the lower threshold recommended by their expert and simply put an 8-foot basement instead of a 9-foot basement with no other changes, they can build the house that they proposed.
Other comments? Pardon me? Sure.
So I just want to add one more comment to the discussion here. If we had an alternative, I prefer not to build this house higher. I mean, there's no aesthetic advantage to having the house taller or giving us more space. I mean, the fact that we're building that basement higher is really to keep it, protect the home from water intrusion. I mean, we'd prefer to have it, to have it go down lower into the ground. So the house, there's no reason to do it other than the water. There's no kind of, we're getting more space in the house or we can get more bedroom space. It's purely, driven by, conservative effort to protect the dwelling from water. So, I mean, we'd prefer not to build it up if we didn't have to.
So would you give up the 9-foot basement?
No, I think the 9-foot basement, I don't really think it's our role here to design interior spaces. And I think that, 8-foot, my old home and my first home in Arden had a 7-foot basement. I could, touch it with my fist. And, pretty much I'd say, I've seen 8-foot basements, I've seen 10-foot basements, a 9-foot basement is, I would say, a home of this magnitude, you probably wouldn't find another 8-foot basement being built today. 9-foot is kind of the standard based on a 10-foot concrete form. It allows, head height for, certain things like exercise rooms in the basements, and it's very common, people put in treadmills, and that brings you 12 inches off the floor. So I don't really think, if it's for us to decide here what the height of the basement ceiling should be. I think that's we're becoming style police a little bit. So.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Forrest.
Well, I beg to differ with the style police comment because basically we're just looking at the ordinance on its face. It's to the extent necessary to build the house. And Edina requires a basement, state code requires 7 feet. So I think that 9 feet exceeds the to the extent necessary.
Other comments? Mr. Platter.
I was going to say, we don't care about your basement height. It could be 20 feet deep for all we care, but what you're doing is pushing up the house because what you want. That's the difference.
But, I guess I'd say it can't be that deep because then they'll be in the water. So it's the finished first floor. Right, if there's no water, then we're not here. I mean, then they can dig down as far as they want. And here
We're
they
not-
have water,
But we're not-
and they're not exceeding the height. They're not really out of character with the neighborhood. And so I don't understand. I guess I'm,
I'm not coming in a basement height, I'm coming how high.
well, but the
it's
basement
built.
height drives the finished first floor.
That's right,
We
it
can't,
does drive it.
Right.
But it doesn't have to drive it like that. They have that choice.
I
Mr.
think the
Chair,
point is, the water may drive the depth or the level of the basement, but the desired height of the basement is what is driving the first floor elevation.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Schroeder.
we're looking at this, I think, on, as noted in the staff report, on conditions 2 and 4. The first one deals with the elevation above the groundwater table. And we have an engineering report that suggests 2 to 3 feet. They chose 3 feet. I think the engineer was comfortable in saying 2 feet. That would seem to be reasonable to me. The other thing that we look at is an increase in floor elevation only if the structure or addition fits the character of the neighborhood in height, mass, and scale. I think Commissioner Staunton and I are on different ends of it, but they have to satisfy both concerns. In my mind, they don't meet either. I'd be curious to know if Commissioner Staunton thinks they actually meet the conditions under number 2.
I do. It says reasonably, to the extent necessary, to reasonably protect the dwelling from groundwater intrusion. I mean, you got a house that's going to cost how much money? And you've got an engineer, you can look at it as 2 to 3 and say you have to do 2, but he's also given permission to do 3.
But the engineer was aware of this and said 2 would reasonably protect the dwelling. That's the way I would have to read this report based on our ordinance.
So let me ask you the reverse question. Are you comfortable with the mass and scale? Do you think it satisfies that one?
With the exception of the first floor elevation, yes.
Other discussion? Okay.
You mentioned that you'd be comfortable with 2 to 3 in the engineering report. As the homeowner, I look at 2 to 3 and I think I'm comfortable with 3 feet. He said 2 to 3. I'm going to be spending a lot of money on Golf Terrace, and I'm more comfortable with the 3 feet, as the engineer stated, 2 to 3. He didn't say 2. He said 2 or 3. So I look at it as 3 feet. We sent a letter out to all the occupants on Golf Terrace explaining what we were doing, showing the mass and scale of the building, and had a meeting about a week ago for any neighbor that was concerned or wanted to come and take a look and ask us questions. And we were there for an hour. A couple people came by, and everyone had nothing but complimentary things to say. Now, I know they may not want to talk to us about that if there is negative feedback, but I would assume that you may have gotten emails or calls if there was any negative feedback on it, because everyone in the neighborhood has had access to the plans and the elevation discussion that we've gone through tonight. So I just wanted to reiterate my thought on why we need the 3 feet and the 9-foot basement. No one's going to build a new house today without a 9-foot basement. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. So I would appreciate any help you could give us.
Other comments? What, Commissioner Shara?
Just to sort of clarify in the middle of all of this, if 2 feet had been selected, work with me on the numbers here, and there were a 9-foot ceiling, the variance requested would be 1.2.
1 foot.
Okay, so that could be accomplished, and you could build the home as proposed if you were willing to accept the 2 feet. Yes. Okay, I want to make sure I understood that. I would also add that I do concur that with regard to the, I guess it's number 4, the second of the 2 that we're applying, conditions that we're applying in this case, I think the house definitely will fit in well with the neighborhood. I don't see any issue with that. You can argue the case, as Commissioner Schroeder is, that it's unrealistically rising in relation, but the overall height and the design with the narrowing on the sides is appealing to me in terms of minimizing the massing feel. My question with regard to the second item is really starting to look at a long-range view within the city and within the code. We've now looked at, I believe, 4 of these. I think it's the second one from this developer in recent weeks. And there are a number of them in neighborhoods that are not traditionally, I mean, they just are areas that have the right kind of ground or the right, there's been a water issue in general if you don't have sump pumps and water tiles and, drainage tiles and other kinds of things. And I think we need, as a group, and the city needs to, regardless of what we do in this particular case, a more clear direction going forward about how to handle this. I hate that we're having this conversation, that it's taking this long to resolve it, both for our citizen and for our builder.
Well, to the point that Commissioner Schroeder makes, your engineer says that 894 is reasonable. Now, frankly, if the engineer thought it should have been 895, if he was a good engineer, it seems to me he would have said it should be at least 895. He said 894. And that part of the whole process that concerns me about this is we've got this email from an engineer. That's the report upon which we're supposed to make a determination. And it's just, I don't know, I would expect something more. When we have a traffic study, we've got an independent traffic engineer that gives us much more than we ever want to read about traffic studies, and I don't know why we don't have the same requirement for a water study like this. And frankly, I'm not willing to say to go, I don't know why we should accept this report if it's not more specific than that.
Mr. Chair, we actually require, it says studies, analyses, and computations shall be submitted in sufficient detail to allow thorough review and approval. We don't see any log of the piezometer readings. We didn't see the follow-up report. I mean, I don't know that this is actually the kind of thorough report, thorough documentation that we're asking for.
Does this quality of documentation, is that consistent with what we've been seeing in the past? I would argue that it is. I mean, I just make the point, I don't want to blow this out of proportion with arguing about the details of the report if this is generally consistent with what we normally receive. I have no problem with asking for something more, but I don't know that we should, skewer a particular applicant because at this point in time we're not comfortable with the report.
I work with engineers all the time. If this was me dealing with my engineer, I would request to have a letter on letterhead, at least with I did check to see that this person actually is a PE registered and licensed in Minnesota, but at least there would be some indication of their certification, of the process, a more detailed process they went through, and on letterhead. We have no idea of the credentials or the story behind this person. I'm sure that because the person is a licensed PE in Minnesota, that it's reasonable, but we just don't have the level of detail that I think we require.
Other comments?
Let me just quickly respond to that. If I can ask Carrie a question, do we specify particular requirements for, what is supposed to be submitted in terms of established criteria, recognized, qualifications?
We don't, other than what you see in front of you as part of the ordinance. I think what we've got is generally, this has been standard for the other requests that we've had for this.
Well, based on that, my reactions, maybe if we feel that something more than that is appropriate, then maybe we'll look at that on a going forward basis. But I don't know that it's appropriate or fair to hold a builder and an applicant to a standard that hasn't been disclosed before.
Well, but what we have in front of us is a preliminary report. It's not even a final report. I work with engineers too, and I've got a feeling that any other report we've had didn't say, well, it could be somewhere between 3 and 4 or 5 and 6 or something like that. It ought to at least say a number. And I agree with Commissioner Schroeder that it ought to say, yeah, this is my letterhead and this is my PE number. And then I understand your frustration, which you must be feeling right now. But it's not a vote of how many people in the neighborhood think it's a great idea or not. It's what the ordinance requires. We were prepared, or we had, some of us thought we should table a question until the next meeting based on the fact that a person wasn't in the audience. Perhaps this should be tabled until the next meeting and have the engineer come back with a more complete report on this thing. So,
Just in terms of if we're looking for some kind of engineering standard of reference, this engineer is willing to make a recommendation based on what the applicant said and what we've all heard is groundwater levels that fluctuate. This engineer was able to make a recommendation based on one reading on one day and then a subsequent reading that we don't actually have information on. I don't think that's the engineering standard of care that we should be looking for to support our criteria number 2.
other comments? What's your preference?
Mr. Chair, you made the suggestion that we continue this to allow the applicant to come back with their engineer to discuss this further. Is that something we want to address with the applicant?
If you wish to address the applicant with that, go right ahead. I'm not making a recommendation we do anything at this point. The matter can die without a motion. It can pass with a motion. It can be denied with a motion, or it could be tabled.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Very good.
I would make a motion that we deny the application for a conditional use permit based on the applicant's failure to justify conformance with our requirements 2 and 4 of our code relative to, is this 850.11 subdivision 2?
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded to deny the conditional use permit on the basis that the applicant has failed to justify the requirements of 850.11 subdivision 2. Is there further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Scheer.
I don't really want to muddy the waters, but would it be possible for the applicant to decide to withdraw the application this evening, provide additional documentation, and have us consider this at a later date?
If the applicant wishes to do that, we could do that.
It is, and it's a recommendation to the council, correct? I mean, we're not making the final decision here.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Sure.
Yeah, we have the final report. As I mentioned, they had done a subsequent reading and it was higher. So the final report is bound complete. So if you guys recommend to the council, that you recommend in favor of the conditional use permit pending, the final report, we could provide that. I just don't think, to have to go back and do this again, because we have to go back to the council on, I think, third week in September.
September 4th.
So we have plenty of time to provide the full report that shows the subsequent reading. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion? The motion is to deny the request. Question.
Sorry. Based on Mr. Buson's comments just now, we would either need to withdraw this motion or defeat this motion in order to move on to the further discussion that we're talking about, correct? Can we amend it?
I thought his discussion was that they would take it to the council.
But there might be, but we could pass it with a condition that the council, that it be conditioned on a full report that would support the level that they're proposing.
That's the only detail.
All right, I just want to make sure I understood what the proposal was and what the implications were here.
Well, we don't have the benefit of seeing that as we make a recommendation going forward. I'd be reluctant to do that.
Okay. Commissioner Carpenter?
If I can ask for clarification on that, because what is it that you're looking for that you wouldn't be getting in the final report, which I assume is going to be a number?
Well, based on the applicants and other applicants that come before us, their statements that groundwater elevations fluctuate. We'd be looking at a series of readings from the piezometer, not just one, and probably not just two. And I think we would also look for the engineer to make much more definitive justifications for the high end of the height increase above the water table, the groundwater elevation, as opposed to us potentially favoring the lower end of the range they identified. I'd like to be able to know the relative issues at each end of the range that their professional expert has identified. And we don't have that.
And we wouldn't have that with any of the engineers prior to this time that have made these types of submittals, if I understand correctly. What we're asking for is, at this point in time, is over and above what has been normally required.
I wouldn't say it's what's been normally required. It might be what's normally been provided to us, but the increase might not have been the same. I think we have to look at every case on its own merits and not try and compare it and floor elevation increases across a whole range. We have to keep continuing to look at this proposal on this site in this neighborhood, particularly because we're looking at in this case, both conditions 2 and 4.
Mr. Platter?
It seems to be becoming a pattern that comes in with very loose information and requesting this changes in height.
But if this is consistent with what we've been asking for all along, if I understood correctly from what Mr. Teague has indicated, that this what we've received is what is typically standard?
This is not.
This is slipshod.
This is
not a good report, and I don't think we should accept it.
I'm adding to that the final report they would presumably be submitting and suggesting that perhaps the council can make that judgment then.
Well, it seems to me the council will have an opportunity to make a judgment regardless. I mean, this is not a situation like the one where we had films, I mean, the lake was running into the basement.
The one that started off.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
The one that was written for.
the Coronas.
No, I agree with that.
Is there further discussion on the motion? Motion has been made and seconded to deny the conditional use permit on the basis that the factors 2, at least factor 2, is it
2 and 4?
2 and 4 have not been met. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion to deny the conditional use permit, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
The motion passes. The conditional use permit is denied.
Can we can talk to you after.
The next item on public hearing, site plan, Bruce Carlson, 7501 France Avenue, Edina, Minnesota. Aren't you lucky you're now?
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Before you is a site plan request. The property is located out at the Centennial Lakes Plaza. You may recall a few months back the Planning Commission considered a sketch plan for this project. It is for a Starbucks coffee shop located out along France Avenue, located here. This is the new Whole Foods located right here. The proposal is for a 1,750 square foot coffee shop that would include a drive-through on the north side of the building here. This would be the pickup window on the north side. They would be proposing general landscaping around the building. There would be no impacts on the greater landscaping on the site itself, and they meet code in terms of number of overstory trees, etc. The building itself would be a brick building with stone accents. It would have been designed essentially to somewhat match the Whole Foods. The applicant has a materials board here that they'll present as part of their presentation. This is a general floor plan of the site. Main entrance to the south, the bar area, workroom, indoor seating. They are proposing outdoor seating on the west side of the building, located here. In terms of parking, 43 stalls would be removed from the plaza to accommodate the new building. Overall, when looking at the entire shopping center, 705 parking stalls are required. There would be 858 remaining as a result of this project. And I had a conversation with Commissioner Schroeder a few days ago, and he made an excellent point. And we didn't talk about this as part of the Whole Foods, but the reason that this site is so overparked is that this is parking area for the park itself. So for the Hughes Pavilion and the park. So that's the reason for the big overage in the number of parking stalls out there. Not so much a concern with this project, but should the density increase in any future development, might be something that we want to take a look at closer. But there are over 150 stalls extra for this site. A WSB conducted a traffic study for this site, and the conclusion was that there's no negative impacts to the adjacent roadways. Chuck Rickard is here from WSB to answer any questions that we might have on that. The item of note...
Our expert.
That's right. The item of note within the study is in regard to the stacking spaces, and that's really the primary issue for the Planning Commission to consider this evening. Our city code requires 5 stacking spaces for the drive-through. Now, that's not specific to a coffee shop. It's within a category of other. Any drive-through window that's not specifically listed in our ordinance. So that's what regulates this. So they meet that other category, but it doesn't specifically address the coffee shops. WSB, Mr. Rickart's study is indicating that between 9 and 11 stacking spaces are required. And again, they're showing 6. So the potential for 3 to 5 extra spaces is what they're recommending. We ran this by Starbucks, and they believe that there won't be conflicts. There may be times when the stacking does exceed the 6 as provided, but it would occur their busiest times are in the morning, no later than 8:30 in the morning, when the plaza is not open. So they feel that can be a workable scenario. We asked Mr. Rickert to provide a couple of alternatives for what the stacking would look like when it does exceed those beyond what's provided. And as you see in this first scenario, it would wind out, and this is to their maximum 11. They're suggesting 9 may work. It wouldn't block the entrance into the park, but it would block the entrance into this side of the center. Our code states that we don't want to block drive aisles, so really this wouldn't meet our code for a required drive aisle. Another alternative that they looked at would be to require the stacking to go to the south in this location here. There would be some one-ways required. It would be only one way in this direction here, so in driving to the drive-through you would have to come almost down to the old Navy building and then cycle back through this way. This would also have to be a one-way so as not to block traffic. So in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of this project because it does meet all of our zoning ordinance requirements. However, if the Planning Commission isn't comfortable with our current ordinance, the way it stacks up with drive-through, you may want to recommend to the council denial of the request and that they institute a moratorium and we study drive-through specifically for the stacking. So with that, I can stand for questions. Again, Mr. Rickard is here and the Starbucks team as well.
Carrie, I have a question. Is there, the alternatives that you've presented are, one, approve it, two, deny it and request a moratorium. Is there any way that we can condition approval on this particular example that you have on the screen right now?
You certainly could require this type of configuration here. We might ask Mr. Rickert to elaborate a little bit more on how this might work, but we certainly could condition an approval on this arrangement here.
Okay. I will ask Mr. Rickert soon, as long as there's not any other questions. Are there other questions of Planner Teague? Commissioner Platter?
And maybe it'll be addressed later, but is there anything, I think we asked this when it was in for sketch plan, but the intersection that goes across to Whole Foods, I mean, that thing's just crazy to get in and out of right now. Is there anything, I know I guess we can't do anything from France, but that's, it's just a constant flow of cars right now, and I expect this one will be even more constant flow of cars coming in. Is there anything we can do there in that intersection?
That might be one we could ask Mr. Rickert to comment on, but there's no proposed changes to that intersection here. You'd be generating traffic going the other way, and then with the two uses, they might go back and forth.
You're going to generate a lot more. I know it's going to, in theory, turn in, but people don't know that, so they're going to wait. It's still going to block that up. That's my comment.
Other questions of Planner Teague? Commissioner Scherer.
As we look at implications of these kinds of installations, I guess I look to others that we have in the city. And the only other drive-through Starbucks that I can think of is the one on Vernon. Am I correct in understanding that?
Boy, that's the only one that I could think of.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of Planner Teague? Mr. Rickert, our expert. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this proposal that's on the screen here, please.
Sure. Once Carrie asked me to look at, the stacking in my recommendations in the report, and I guess there was a new site plan from what I originally had in my study. I showed a little different configuration, slightly different. So when I started looking at this, the obvious first one is having someone turn right in, which was the first concept that you saw up on the screen and backed up, to the Plaza Drive there. The only way this one would work is to create this, to not allow traffic to turn right in here, because that's what they would do. I mean, if that was open, that they could turn right in there, they would turn in and go right in there, and we'd still have them stacked up there. So directing that drive-through traffic to, this configuration and, with signing and so forth, not to block this, those are the types of things we could do. They are correct in the studies that have shown that this is primarily an AM situation. where this, morning situation where this does occur, where these maximum queues do occur. So, that is correct, and the rest of the center typically isn't open, I believe, during those morning times. So there wouldn't be as much conflict with these parking stalls, during those morning times. The only little piece that would be one way would be this little piece. This, I guess we could look at a little closer. It's 24 feet wide. The issue would be a vehicle parked backing up into someone stopped in the lane there. So that would be the only issue with pulling out into and having this be maintained as a two-way, drive aisle. Does that get to your questions?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Scher?
When you mentioned just now that the locations that were studied pointed to identification of the time slot up to 8:30 as being the highest use and potential stacking issues, what did we study to get to that?
There was a study that was done by, it was a national study, but they actually used 12 locations within Minnesota as part of that study.
Okay.
And one of them was actually the Starbucks in Edina was
On Vernon.
was included in that, and that had some of the highest peaking, morning peaking, stacking and of all of them. I believe their peak was 16 vehicles, in the morning is what the peak was there. So based on all those averages, the Minnesota averages, are around 11, is the ideal, providing for 11 vehicles. The national average is a little bit less, it's around 10, so it's a little less on a national basis, but in the Minnesota one, it was 11. I believe there were 12, or there was, 12 overall, I'm sorry, 6 of them were in Minnesota, not 12 of them, but 6 of them were in Minnesota.
I'm glad to hear that the other one in Edina and Vernon was in the study, because I'm told by the management of that store that it is, if not the highest, one of the highest volumes of Starbucks in the state. So I think that builds in a certain volume for your study.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions of Commissioner Platter?
What would you say it's shown on this plan right now, but I'm really concerned about those cars backing in and out of there. If you just got rid of one of that whole rows, whatever is it, 10 spots, and that became a whole stacking distance down there, so it's right there.
To get rid of that
to get rid of that, and then having, seems like you could still use the other side unimpeded, because, this would be a very bad situation for anyone parking in there. Then there's somebody who will never get in and out. That just doesn't seem like a good situation.
Yeah, the tough part about that is again, it's that morning peak, and you're eliminating a lot of parking there for a short period, just for that little short period of time. So, there's going to be some wasted space there for most of the day. I mean, that would be the only negative about that. It could be done. There's space available to do that. Another option that Carrie and I actually talked about just a little bit, and we haven't really explored this too much, is, if we would widen along the main drive aisle here to provide some type of a, so vehicles could get by people waiting there. So it would mean cutting into this, and it appears that they're replacing a lot of this curb anyway. So if we could pull it in a little bit, I don't know if there's space available to do that or not, but that would be an option too, is to provide that so vehicles coming in here could bypass, and it wouldn't be blocking that aisle.
Commissioner Schroeder?
Chuck, I just need to question one thing. Just now you said 11 spaces would be ideal, or 11, I think you said stacking, but I think you mean queuing spaces would be ideal. In your report, you say ideally 13 vehicles should be provided.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah,
Okay.
it's actually 11 to 13, and
Right.
13 is the ideal.
Right.
11 is the
You said
average.
minimum.
Another raise, yeah.
Right, and an engineer.
Commissioner Scher?
I wonder if you could, I lost you on the last description. If we altered the stacking to the program that you were just suggesting, can you take a pointer and show me where the cars would go?
Should we just hit back to go back? Oh, there we go.
Okay.
So in this situation, instead of having them, stacked in basically the inbound lane there,
Right?
if there's room, and again, we haven't looked at it, but if this could be widened, if this, instead of this curb line being right here, if it could be widened over a little bit here and still be able to make a turn in here, I mean, that would have to be looked at too. That would get this lane of stacked cars out of that through lane. And that's an option.
Looks like a tight radius to me.
It probably would be, that it'd have to be looked at to see if it could be done.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
I note that if you could go back to that other one. Thanks. This kind of thing did seem to work when McDonald's had their drive-through. You came all the way through the lot and then made your turn and then went queued up to the drive-through there, so. Commissioner Schroeder?
I would just like to comment on, or make a distinction between these two proposals for queuing. This one shows the 11, and if we had to get to the ideal that Chuck mentioned at 13, the implication, or the impact would be on the center's own parking and drive aisles. If you go back to the other scheme, once we get to once we get past 11 vehicles, we're into the drive, which I believe exists through an easement to the city that allows us to access the park. And there is no other way to get around. We don't have, and we couldn't drive into the oncoming lane there because we have a median that prevents us. So this is limiting in terms of impacts to, I think it's called Plaza Drive.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Looking at that same, actually, skipping to the other one, that one, how big a concern do you think it is for vehicles that are exiting to actually cross through the incoming lane? I look at that and it just seems to me like a recipe for disaster.
Well, these will be, if they are stacked back here, they'll be stopped. I mean, the only issue would be is if someone would stop in the middle of the lane. I mean, that would really be, and they'd have to wait. I mean, there may be some waiting, or they may get impatient and come, back around the other way.
Yeah, but, well, I agree with that.
I mean, there is a lot of situations out there, that you talk about where there is stacking, and I know your ordinance or your codes say that you're not supposed to do this, but there's a lot of examples where, restaurants, fast food stack through parking lots like this. So, I mean, it has been done.
Other questions of Commissioner Forrest?
When I look at this, I think too that if you're trying to drive into, what if somebody isn't coming from France Avenue? What if they want to come from 76th Street? If they're queuing up around the corner and into the France Avenue entrance there, then somebody would be cutting in line to get in. I mean, they wouldn't want to go around the block and go to France Avenue at that point, I wouldn't think. If they're coming in one of the side entries.
They're coming, all the access would be off of this Plaza Drive.
No, I'm talking about to the south, off of 76th.
I don't think you can you get into the parking lot from the south?
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
Just,
Okay.
it's just east of that old Navy building.
Where you have the bottom upside down drive-through.
Right here.
The other side.
Okay, down here, okay.
No, the other, actually,
The other
further,
side.
they'd come,
Right underneath the drive-through sign there.
Yep.
Other questions? Thank you. Does Starbucks wish to say anything about this? The good news is you're so successful, and the bad news is you're so successful.
If you have, just let me know this.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good evening, I'm Bruce Carlson. I am Project Director with Mid-America Real Estate, hired as landlord's representative for Centennial Lake Shopping Center. I am the developer for the Whole Foods that currently opened, and we also are going to have Home Goods is going to take over the Ultimate Electronic space too, so just throw that out there since that's
What's going in where McDonald's was?
You haven't been there then lately because
No, I
that
haven't.
Jason's Deli is already open. That's fantastic.
Oh,
restaurant.
really? Oh, great.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Okay.
that's fantastic. So, good evening, Chair and members of the commission and staff and those here and those at home. So I'll give a brief introduction, and you see I think I have someone behind me already. And with me is Chris Van Wanning. He's Store Development Director for Starbucks out of Starbucks headquarters. He flew up tonight to answer your questions. I think he'll have a lot of good information for you this evening. And one of the things I know you guys want to talk about a lot is how beautiful the store looks, because it is a fantastic looking store. And I want to just say a couple quick things about it before we get to the topic of the drive-through. First of all, in adding this, we're going to be adding landscaping to the shopping center. We're also going to be taking away asphalt and taking away parking. We're going to be adding water treatment, underground water treatment to the shopping center as well. In addition to what I think is, again, just beautiful architecture, along with a street-side outdoor patio. So I think the architecture and the amenity of this facility, along with the amenity of the drive-through, really makes this an attractive use. And I know Chris is going to talk about this as well, but just want to remind everyone again that when our stores open in the shopping center and when Starbucks is busy out here, because we look at that from a landlord's perspective and from the tenant's perspective too, as a very complementary use. If there's like one thing that we could put out here and beautify this area and put a complementary tenant in, it's this one. So that's why we're really so excited and want to try to make this work. And with that, I will let Mr. Van Wanning address you. Chris, to you guys.
From Seattle?
No, I'm out of Chicago. We have a regional office out of there, and that's Minnesota is part of my territory out of there. So one of the comments is from our peak times. 40% of our business is done before 10 o'clock in the morning. So one of the things I did is I pulled analogous stores and I look at what the projected volume of this store would be, and I looked at between 7 and 10 o'clock on an hourly basis, how many customers we would typically run through that store and how many of those customers would typically go through the drive-through. And we're really looking at about 70 to 90 customers an hour between 7 and 10 o'clock in the morning, and 60% of those customers would go through the drive-through. From a amount of time that the service times in our drive-through, a 5-car stack from our drive-through window to our menu board is optimum for us to get their cars through there as quickly as possible. With that layout, when you place your order, by the time you get to the drive-through window, the order is complete, we give it to you, and you can get out quickly. With less than a 5-car stack, it'll slow down the process. Our typical service times run between 30 seconds to 60 seconds, the average being 45 seconds from the time you place your order to you can get it. So, and again, the bulk of our customers will be going through the drive-through prior to 10 o'clock in the morning. What else can I tell you?
What do you think about the alternatives that we talked about here?
One of my issues with the alternative B, which works, but if you have a drive-through lane next to parking stalls and people get out of the cars in those parking stalls and have to walk across that drive-through lane, it's a concern from a safety standpoint in that you have people on cell phones, you have, trying to get their day started, whatever. It is a concern. Do we have situations like that? Yes. Is it a plan that we would work with? Of course we would.
Commissioner Schroeder?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Based on the site plan, I want to know whether we really have a 5-car stack. It actually looks like the order point is almost at the front hubcap of the 5th car, and it looks like you're actually closer to having a 4-car stack. And my second question would be, what I understand your top 10 criteria is an 8-car queue and a six-car queue is acceptable, and it shows on your site plan you have 6 cars. So you're actually meeting kind of the bottom level of your thresholds for acceptability according to your top 10 criteria for a drive-through store.
We need a 5-car stack from the center of the drive-through window to our menu board, and we have that here. And again, that gets...
That's not what I'm seeing in the site plan.
Where is the menu board?
Maybe it'd be worthwhile actually getting a site plan up that we can look at, and you can point, because I may be reading the menu board differently than what I see on this site plan.
Menu board's right there. Menu board.
It's right on car 5.
Actually, can I ask you to use the civil engineering site plan? I'm assuming you're going to be building from a plan that's not this one right here, and we have a civil engineering plan that was submitted with our packet.
I'm looking, that's where our menu board is right there.
Just put an old, this one has
Okay, so our menu board is right there. There's that. That's our menu board.
This C1 of 5.
C1.
I got a bigger one here.
This is our, can you see this showing up on anything? It's just not moving?
It's taking a picture from
Yeah, it's making a picture of this right
Oh,
here. So,
okay.
let's see if I-
So this is, yeah, okay, that's our pre-menu board is, that is our menu board right there. And then we have a pre-menu board right here that when you first drive in, you see, you know, the items that you can think about what you want to order, and then when you get to the menu board, you do your ordering.
So, based on that, and based on your criteria for a 5-car stack, is that 5th car actually at a point where it can order? I mean, it looks close. I just want to make sure, since I'm assuming that you'd be constructing from the civil site plan, that this actually meets your criteria.
Yeah, the way I look at my interpretation is, yes, the 5th car is at the menu board, and that's where it would be ordered.
And then, can you also comment about your preference for an 8-car queue and a 6-car queue being acceptable, and particularly given that we have history in Edina at Starbucks of having lots of cars going through in the morning, and whether 6-car is really acceptable, or whether your threshold for preference in your top 10 criteria being 8 would be more ideal here.
In a perfect world, would we like to have as much stacking as possible? In working with this site, the reality is that we do have the stacking that we have there now, yes. From a volume standpoint, if you're talking about the store down the street here at Highway 100, that store will do approximately 50% more volume than we're projecting this store is going to do. So from the amount of people that go through there compared to this one is going to be less. We have the store in the Galleria Mall that also is serving this particular trade area. So this will be the second store within the trade area. Any other questions that I can't point to?
Just want to get the right plan.
Sure. And again, the plan is, if it needs to be adapted a little bit, for example, if the building needs to be moved up, and we would lose some of the outdoor seating so that the drive-through window goes up, so that we can get a full stack, we're more than willing and happy to do that.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Staunton.
Just picking up on that point, and I apologize if this was discussed at the sketch plan, I wasn't here for the sketch plan discussion. Were there any other configurations that were discussed in terms of orienting the building?
Bruce, you can talk to them about that better than I can.
And to the extent there were, why did you settle on this one?
We settled on this one because of the turning it the perpendicular would block more view of tenants behind. So it was done as a way to complement the tenants in the rear of the shopping center for visibility for them from France Avenue.
Oh, but it's a lot lower than those. But all right.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason I wonder is it just seems like we're, at this, and this may not be what you're focused on, but we're spending a lot of time thinking about France Avenue and how to make it more pedestrian interactive, how to make it more inviting, how to make it easier to cross, et cetera. And now we're going to add another layer of automobiles basically between that sidewalk and the parking lot. And if you turned it, couldn't you run the drive-through kind of behind it and straight out to the street instead of running it then back in front of? And I'll grant you that right now it might not be the greatest view in the world sitting on the outdoor tables, but someday we're hoping to make that a more attractive kind of interface with France Avenue. And so long as you're sitting there with the cars coming by you on the drive-through, it seems like that's a challenge. And I'm just wondering if you thought about.
We did. We thought about it, and like I said, the decision was to not turn it so it's parallel to France Avenue because of visibility for the other tenants. The other tenants prefer it to be this way, so that's why we're presenting it this way.
Thank you.
How would you handle the stacking under those circumstances? Because wouldn't it get tighter then?
Well, I think to the question of the stacking, I think then you'd have to do the line down and then double back, and you'd probably have to make the drive aisle wider to get out. I spent some time in this lot. There's also people who will come from the other way down whatever road it is. So they're going to come at it from two different directions.
Yeah, they'll come from both Park Lawn and 76th,
Right.
and they'll go diagonally. I think a lot of the diagonal traffic has stopped a bit because of Whole Foods now, because it used to, when Storables and Thomasville were there, they weren't very busy.
Yeah.
And so he was.
Well, I'm thinking going around, 76th is the one
Yeah.
on the south end. I could see people coming from that direction too, especially if they were coming south on France. They'd have to turn at one of those to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or U-turn down, which is another issue. But I won't even go there.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is that, once you get off of France Avenue and you start to slow your car down as you're coming into Plaza Drive, you're in a parking lot. Yeah, can I go speeding 45 miles an hour through a parking lot? I sure can. It's dangerous. I'm going to hurt somebody. But generally, people are going slow. And again, it's in the morning. If you go out to this site at 7:30 in the morning and go see how many cars are there, and the number will be 0 out there. Old Navy is not open. There are no employees there whatsoever. There are no cars. So this is why the tenants and the landlord are agreeable to having cars, stack up. We would never want cars to stack up and block customer traffic. We're only cutting off our nose to spite our face in that situation. Yeah, we'll make Starbucks successful, and then we'll have, unsuccessful people behind us. So we put a lot of thought into tenant mix there. And again, we've already shown for many years that we've been able to handle an interior drive-through situation with McDonald's. Truth be told, I tried to talk McDonald's into, rather than leaving, to come out here. But they are much bigger. They are twice the size of a Starbucks, over 3,000 square feet. So I think that a lot of it, it definitely is an internal matter between tenants of how this all works with employee parking and customers, and when people are busy and when people aren't busy.
I think that's all well and good, and I think, from our standpoint, we really don't have much discretion to talk about what you do from an internal standpoint. I think you got a great project here based on our experience with the Starbucks over here, I don't want traffic, I don't want traffic in your stacking line backing up onto that access road.
On the Plaza Drive.
On the Plaza
Yeah,
Drive.
I agree. Yeah.
And based on our experience with Starbucks here, that will happen if you have the stacking come around the loop there.
Right, so if we go with option B, then the question is, you're just blocking potential parking, future parking.
Right, and that's your internal problem.
Right.
Otherwise, you can't even get in, so.
The one good thing about a coffee shop, and Chris hit on it, is that it's a 45 second to 60 second. So any of these problems that come up are very, very short-term problems. So if a car did happen to cheat and go forward, and another car is there giving them a dirty look, it's not going to be, a half-hour-long problem. It's a 40-second problem, then that car goes, and then it moves. So it works.
Well, and you have alternatives too. If, for example, in your stacking lane, somebody's blocking here, somebody comes through the drive-through lane and they see that, they can just roll down there. There's multiple. You're not stuck into one way to get out.
The only danger is you don't want to block somebody first thing in the morning waiting to get their morning coffee.
You can actually get out of your car and go in Starbucks.
Oh,
and get your coffee right and talk to someone.
There's a thought.
Face to face. The other thing that we talked about too that we should mention is that on Plaza Drive, adding no parking, no drive-through parking. So they must go forward.
Well, they'll end up in the lower level though then, because if you're stacked in the lane, then you can't even turn in. Commissioner Scherer.
I want to be sure I understand one thing. I was a little bit intrigued with Commissioner Pleditor's comment about wiping out one of the lanes of those parking spaces, because I do see potential for accidents occurring in that line. And I would second the chairman's observations. I'm a great user of the Starbucks that we have on this end of town. I'm there a lot, several times a day, many days, and the line is not only in the morning in that location. that has ups and downs as the day goes on, and you could be in the line a while, and they will drift out onto Eden. It did occur to me, if I'm doing the math correctly, Carrie, and maybe you can tell me, we currently have 858 parking spots in the complex. 705 are required, including the Starbucks. So we have 153 overage.
Yes.
So if you did wipe out 11 slots in a lane, you might not like it, but it would be doable.
I almost think from the discussion and because of the easement on Plaza Drive for the city park, that maybe we should not even keep trying to wrap people around into Plaza Drive. So then that other lane wouldn't maybe be an option.
I would concur with that assessment.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking that everyone was going to kind of like option B, so better. So maybe focusing attention on option
Having
B.
it encased within your own property and straighter lines, so
Right.
people aren't having to curve around, to me seems like a simpler proposition.
Right.
But-
Yep, and then we can deal with, we might even, and then just occurred to me this afternoon, we might even move the trash enclosure, if that's the case. We did actually have the trash enclosure, thinking about bringing it out here and putting landscaping around it, so we could do that, and then you wouldn't have any cars parking right there, and then get that trash enclosure away from that central entrance as well.
My
so.
bet is you will have the good fortune of cars in those lanes.
Good, that would be good. I know this will be the fourth Starbucks in Edina. I don't know if many cities can make that claim. Maybe in Seattle they can. And I asked them today. I go, are you just half done? You got 4 more to put here in Edina? But I think it will, because of that situation and where it's at relative to residents. They are much smarter than I am on knowing their volume, and they've become experts at knowing their volume. So I guess we got to give him a little credit on knowing what kind of volume is going to be there, because they're not going to waste their time going somewhere that's not going to work for them.
Commissioner Platitor?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I'd like to really endorse is it option B, where they come down into the, I don't think there's any way you can do that and have the potential risk of that looping back on and blocking that off. So other questions I had, and I brought this up before, kind of that same intersection of Whole Foods, is there anything that can be done there to get people out more? I mean, it's crazy right now with Whole Foods, and this is just going to exacerbate that one, especially as people come out that way and try to turn back onto France. Is there anything you can do with that intersection?
I don't think so. You know, inbound traffic has the clear go, and that's very common at regional malls, whether it's, you know, Southdale or Burnsville Mall. So I think that is the way to do it. Hold back everybody until they have a clear, everybody coming in has clear reign. And in that particular situation, if you can't, and I think people are going to figure this out more and more, especially in the wintertime. You know, going straight and taking a left and parking underneath the ramp and then popping up and going to Whole Foods is a great way to do it. This actually has the amenity of parking. I just did it, a few weeks ago when it was 101 degrees out because I didn't want my car hot. I'm like, well, I can just park underneath the ramp and go up. So I think it has the options of plenty of places to go. So I don't know if you can think of something, you know.
I'm asking
let
you.
us know. It's been
not
thought
my
of
problem
since
to solve.
1988. It's been there.
And the other one, I assume you're completely screening the transformer, right? I don't see it on the plan, but I'm assuming you're completely screening that?
Yes.
Looks like you have a half screen around it. If I read the plans, I'm not sure what's on there.
I'd have to ask Dan Parks, our civil engineer. Land. Half screen and it has landscaping around it.
Why don't you screen the whole thing?
You can always ask for that.
I'm asking for that.
Okay.
The other thing is the trash container. Is that of the same material as the rest of the building, or the same look, or is
it? So that would be the same. Would have the stripe in it, so it'd be the same as a wall section.
Okay.
Yeah. Trash
container would. Okay. And then I know you've got some nice, pretty elevations here, and what never shows up, if the mechanical units, the rooftops, are they actually screened on here, or are they going to all sit up on top of here?
I think there's a city ordinance.
Because I'm asking that they're screened.
Yeah, and so we would meet the, because I know of one, we just put in a Pro Cuts, and that was a little close, and that up there by Chuck E. Cheese, so that one is screened, so.
And kind of the same thing, I know, it's a very nice elevation. I'm just concerned on any utilities or anything that's not running up the walls and being slapped down at the end like we've had in a couple projects here, and just to make sure that none of those show up on these elevations, because you definitely have four-sided and more visibility to this thing, so It's all as an island too.
Well, there are on Whole Foods utility lines, but they blend in. They're painted exact color of the building.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You go down the street at by the Five Guys. If you look on the outside of that one, there's just electrical lines or something. Right
our
on the outside of
competitors
that
do a horrible job.
Thought maybe that was you. I didn't know.
No, that's not us.
And our building will be LEED certified as well also.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will be a LEED certified. I don't know if everyone heard that. Starbucks builds a LEED certified building. So in addition to the water treatment that we'll be doing, we'll have a LEED certified building there.
Is that volume build or is it individual?
All of our new stores are LEED certified, and typically the internal build-out that we do will get us the minimum LEED certification. However, in this case, because we're building the building, the base building itself will be LEED certified. So we will get we're going to double dip on this one.
So you're going to have the plaque and everything, so it's...
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to cut off the discussion, but Commissioner Forrest, we do have a sketch plan review coming up.
Well, my turn. You did bring your materials boards. I suppose we should see it at least briefly at some point. My concern when I was looking at this site plan was kind of trying to visualize its use. And in this town, there are a lot of times when people, say groups of 3 to 6 people, want to get together for an afternoon meeting at some restaurant or coffee shop, and it's hard to find a place sometimes. And what I'm seeing here is the seating inside seems to be, like somewhat minimal other than counter space. And then I look at the outside seating and not even considering our seasons here, I'm somewhat concerned because I don't see a single deciduous tree nearby. I mean, there might be some on the whole greater shopping center site, but there, you may have umbrellas on those tables, but here you're sitting in a sea of asphalt next to how many lanes of traffic, including the drive-through, and it's going to be, I think, kind of noisy and very hot. I mean, it's the typical desert plants out there, the stelladoros and the sedums and a Technia arborvitae over by the entrance or something, so that, it bothers me. It just doesn't look appealing to me as a place I'd want to go hang out on an afternoon. And I mean, I'm not saying that's going to turn out to be an unappealing place, but just looking at this, it looks like it would be hot in the summer and bright and noisy. I do like the idea of moving your trash area away from the building because that's the first impression. You go around the corner and here's Starbucks and here's the trash receptacle. So I'd vote for that one too. So thanks.
Can I comment on that? We just did a major landscaping. The entire shopping center was re-landscaped, and I actually feel a little bit bad about your comments because we worked really hard, especially on France Avenue. We had a serendipitous sidewalk. We've got all new plantings. We put new trees there already. The patio at Whole Foods is beautiful. And, some people, do like the action. There's New York City, and they do like action and vibrancy. And you can go right to the park. If you want that quiet treat in, you can walk right, to that beautiful park. I feel like Centennial Lakes has it all on there. And there is no way that we're going to be able to make the Old Navy parking lot into a park. It's just not going to happen. And some people aren't going to want to sit on that patio. But for those who do, it is there. And I think the patio looks fantastic. And I think the new landscaping looks great, too.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do really appreciate the fact that you did do the berming and the sidewalks along France. I think that is really helpful. And like I said, I'm looking at the site plan here. I'm just looking at the map, and that was my impression. So certainly haven't lived it. What was I going to ask you? Oh, I guess, I don't know if there's, the cafe seating and stuff, the countertop seating, I just don't, is that what that is over on by the west entrance there? Is that a counter for people to sit at?
I don't know if, Carrie, if you could put the floor plan back up.
I'm sorry. Maybe we should do one thing at a time here. I wasn't.
So you have a community table here with 10 seats. You've got
Okay.
three, there's 6 there, so 16. And then our typical store has about 25 to 30 seats, depending on the size and the configuration. Another thing that we look at is what other stores, what's the market like? And we have the Galleria store. So this is kind of like a little bit of a hub and spoke type system in that we would use or look at the Galleria store as more of that meeting place. It's in the mall, it's more conducive to that. And this, with the drive-through component, is more towards the commuter, the convenience person, the mom with kids in the back of the car that doesn't want to get them out. The two would complement each other.
Okay, I can respect that. I guess what I was looking at when I was looking at that, what you call the community table, the seating there looks so small compared to the other seating, and that's what was concerning me.
And one of the things with that community table, being a LEED certified building, one of the things we try to do is use reclaimed wood. So all these community tables are all reclaimed woods, old barn wood. From an aesthetic standpoint, you'll be very, very pleased with it.
Thank you. You've addressed my concerns. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, well, you see the materials board. Could you move that drawing so we can see the materials? Want to describe that?
No, I don't want to describe that. I'll have Kathy Anderson, our architect, come up and describe that.
Okay. Kathy Anderson with Architectural Consortium. What you're looking at are the exact same brick specifications and stone that is used on the Whole Foods and the rest of Centennial Lakes. So we've got the field brick, the banding with the light, the limestone, and we've got the green accents for Starbucks and the bronze storefront mullion. Not a thing different.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else wish to comment on this proposal from the public? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Okay, the proposal is a site plan review per staff. It meets all the requirements of the ordinance. There are conditions on page 5. What is your preference? Any comments, discussion? I understand from Planner Teague that we could add a sixth condition that they implement what has come to be known as stacking Plan B.
You could.
Okay. What is your preference? Pardon me? I'm looking for a motion. If there's no further discussion, I'm looking for a motion.
I would move that we approve the plan, subject to the observations by staff, and also adding the requirement that is approved, subject to the implementation of stacking Plan B.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Platter offered some architectural conditions that I think we ought to be addressing, dealing with screening of transformer, ensuring no rooftop units are visible, which is a code requirement. But I think importantly, making sure that the utility conduits and boxes that are typically placed on the exterior of the building are not visible or somehow masked.
Sure.
The issue with the screening of the transformer on 3 sides, we have to have one side by code for access. So we are screening it as much as we can. And the new codes now demand that the meters and the lines ride on the outside of the buildings, but we can color them to match the building, but we can't make them go away.
Turn the transformer screen then, so it screens from the lot, not from the building.
Okay. So turn it to the south.
So the people going through the drive-through see it, but the people around the lot don't.
You can do that.
So is the maker of the motion amenable to those additional conditions?
Yes.
The seconder the same? So motions, Commissioner, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, you're just holding your pen.
I'll put it in my other hand.
Thank you. So a motion's been made and seconded to approve the site plan with the conditions as detailed on page 5 of the staff report, plus stacking Plan B, screening the transformer from the lot, from no visible things on the roof, and masking the conduits up the side of the building. Is there any further discussion?
Coloring the conduits up the side of the building.
Well, coloring or masking them, right, to match. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
It is approved. Next item, reports, sketch plan, Mount Properties, 6500 France Avenue, Edina.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This is a site you're all very familiar with. I think we went through maybe a couple of sketch plans, maybe at least a couple of preliminary site plans, rezonings. We're back again with a sketch plan review. This is the property that's kitty corner from Southdale Fairview Hospital. There's the existing office buildings on the site. Zoned POD office district, guided regional medical in the comp plan. And the comp plan also guides it for 2 to 4 story or 4 stories with a max. This was the building that was approved or recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. It went to the City Council. It was a 2-phase project. The first phase was to be 4 stories. Second phase completed the 2 levels. This was a rendering of the 6th level. That project the council made a motion to authorize staff to prepare findings, resolutions for denial. The applicant withdrew that request before before final action was taken. So that project was completely withdrawn. Now we're starting over again. The main reason for the council's denial was they weren't comfortable with the 6 stories, 88 feet tall. They had indicated that they would be comfortable with maybe a 4-story up to 62 feet. 62 feet was the maximum height to the top of the mechanical equipment. They had indicated that they were comfortable with that. This was a look at the 4-story project. That project, as you recall, there were 2 separate buildings. The parking structure was separated from the structure itself. So the sketch plan that's before you this evening is for a 5-story building with the parking ramp is attached. And it would be all constructed in one phase, 102,000 square feet, which was the maximum build-out at the first project. So what the elevation here on the screen, on the left-hand side was the first phase 4-story project with the mechanical equipment on the top. That was 62 feet tall. The project before you this evening for sketch plan is a 5-story with the mechanical equipment being incorporated inside the building, so there would be no mechanical equipment on top. This is a rendering of what the building would look like from 65th and France. You might note that the corners have been rounded. The first iteration that you looked at where they were looking at development just on the one lot, this was kind of the look of that building. The last one had that sharp edge corner, so that there's a slight change there, a little bit more presence on the corner. The parking ramp has gotten slightly larger. This is a look off of 65th, really the main entrance into the building. A look at the parking ramp. The parking ramp is now a 5-level at maximum build-out. They're going to be looking at a proof of parking agreement. This would be, if that last level would be needed. Another look. So essentially the differences are before the project 6 stories, 88 feet tall. The sketch plan before you, 5 stories, 62 feet tall. The parking ramp is now attached. It's a 5-level parking ramp. The previous plan was 4 levels. And again, that rounded front on the 65th Street. And the other change is, you note that they're suggesting a green roof with the mechanical equipment being removed from the top of the building. There's opportunity for a green roof, so they're proposing that. You recall the previous plan had a green roof just on the podiums in that location here. So I will move aside. The applicant is here to make a brief presentation as well, but the idea tonight is just to get your thoughts on this 5-story project. With that, I'll turn it over to the commission for questions.
Questions of staff? Commissioner Staunton.
What happens after tonight?
They will bring the sketch plan to the city council for their comments.
Other questions of staff? Thank you. Hello, stranger.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Steve Michaels with Mount Development, and it is a pleasure to be before you this evening with the new project. We are very enthused about the architectural changes that have been made over the last number of months, both landscaping, circulation, and architectural. So we are here before you tonight to gain some comments, thoughts as we continue to move forward, and then hopefully gain your approval and submit a formal application for a October review. The plans do show some unique changes from the previous. We do have about 4,000 square feet of more green space compared to the current 2 buildings that are in place. So we've got more circulation around the perimeter of the building, a little bit softer feel. By having the heating and cooling units in the basement, the outside of the building has a very monolithic, clean look, even from farther down France Avenue or from the farther vistas east and west. So it will be kind of a special building by having just a superstructure of a full architected building without any heating and cooling units on the roof. We have added a fair amount more landscaping, flowers, softer touches around the pedestrian areas of France Avenue. At 65th, we've got the seating tables. It's a little bit larger area now that we've pushed the building corner back into the superstructure. We do have a larger green space around the art feature, which is kind of an 8 or a helix that you can see is a very light color there. By pushing the ramp and the buildings apart a little bit, we do come up with a fair amount more green space in that area. So we are here, the entire development team with Aurora Investments, Luigi Bernardi, and Ed Farr to answer any questions that you've got. Ed would like to add a couple of comments to the architecture. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Steve. Chair and Commissioners, I'll just put up the site plan. Oh, it was just there a moment ago. Thank you. Appreciate that. And just add very brief comments, if I might. The green roof, you'll notice that we brought that up to the main roof. We were unable to put it on the 4-story building earlier because it was a phased development, and of course we were planning on going up above that, and we thought that the green roof would be of a greater benefit specifically to our neighbors to the south point of France if we relocated our greenery from where we had it on the podium roofs on France Avenue and facing 65th. If my mouse can point to those previous areas where we did have a little bit of greenery before on those podium roofs, to have a greater benefit now that we're putting up the building all at once again, to our neighbors to the south and on the main roof. So we're happy to be doing that. One of the points that Council told us, as well as we heard these comments from you folks here on the Planning Commission, was a lack of pedestrian accessibility into our structure from the main visible corner of the project, the northeast corner off 65th and France. And so in our redesign of the corner back to this very grand corner, we're happy to have that back. We also reintroduced that pedestrian entry there so that you can now, as a pedestrian, enter the project off of what can be perceived as the main entrance corner of the building, as well as our main vehicular entrance, the visitor drop-off, which of course occurs off of the 65th Street entrance. By connecting the building up to the parking deck, I have adjusted some floor-to-floor levels so that now you can
exit from your car on third and fourth floors and go directly into the building from that west end of the building, which adds convenience to the visitor and the patient, of course, if they don't have to navigate an elevator to get to those clinic floors. So there's added convenience there. Of course, we have the drive-under situation now. That driveway for loading dock access now traverses through the building on a cavity through the building on first and second floor down here at the place where it was before. So we're building over the top of that loading berth. The last point I just wanted to reiterate is the HVAC. Of course, now it's in a basement mechanical room, basically, so that we've taken all those, what would have been 4 total HVAC units off the roof and placed those conveniently in the basement. So thank you. If you have any comments, we're here. Commissioner Forrest.
Well, I really commend you on your tenacity. It's great. I have a question. Your handicap parking now, is that access from inside the ramp instead of a separate area outside? And from what I see, it looks like I don't see, oh, I see where the pedestrian crossing is. So the pedestrian crossing isn't sheltered by that overhang roof, but...
You're correct on both comments.
Okay.
We have accessible parking inside the ramp. You'll see that on the site plan view, I have 3 here shown in bird's eye view, located next to the pedestrian entrance to the building. And then you may also recall that when the building did not span all the way to the parking deck, we had a dedicated accessible parking area that was just 6 stalls where people could possibly drop someone off and then return around the loop and park in it was a non-paid parking area for just accessible stalls. But now, due to the convenience of the level access on the upper floors, we did in fact delete that dedicated accessible parking area and scattered those accessible stalls throughout each level. Okay, and you're also correct on the pedestrian walkway that you noted there, and this will be safer to the extent that there won't be any traffic in cars, visitors or employees traversing past this pedestrian walkway area. It'll simply be for a delivery purpose. Commissioner Shea?
I'm especially pleased about the loading zone changes. I think that's better for Point of France, and I think it's much more attractive for everybody else. I really want to commend you. This is a classic of, you've been put through a lot, but I actually personally believe that this is, all things considered, the best of every version. I like the green roof. I like the lack of the mechanical on the roof. I think the exterior look is enhanced, especially from the last version. On the corner, the additional ground floor outdoor space, big plus in that area. Pedestrian friendlier. The drop-off area looks improved to me. I like the ramping attached and the access from every floor. So, and I also like the fact that I'm assuming now you won't be going through a second construction phase to add 2 floors at some later date. So to me, this is really a classic of sticking with it and coming up with really a much improved product. I'm very, very pleased with it.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Are there handicap spots on the first floor? Yes, there will be handicap spots on grade level, first floor. Okay. We're going to skip the second floor because there's no direct access from the parking deck to the building at that level, so we wouldn't want to confuse anybody. So wherever there's access to the building, there will be handicap spots. That's correct. 3 of our 4 floors. And I see the exiting is there's essentially 2 outs on 65th. Do you anticipate much exit traffic coming to the south? I can't say what that volume is. It is still being offered. The site plan does somewhat mask that exit from the parking ramp, but if you can follow my dotted lines on that site plan, you can actually see that we have retained that exit from the parking ramp on the southeast corner so that one can exit down here and sneak out this south drive to southbound France Avenue only. That has always been in our revised site plan here, and we're not changing that. They cannot turn to the left and go north and re-enter the visitor drop-off area, so that access point is still allowed. I do not know what percentage of trips might desire that. I don't know if that was addressed in the traffic report when we had that analysis done, and the circulation has not changed. So I don't know if you have a better answer than I can provide. I was just curious. I have a question, for Mr. Michaels. When you presented, when you presented the 4 to 6 option, one of your justifications, you wanted to get the 4 filled up before you worked on the 6, the extra 2 floors. I assume that this plan, from a build-out standpoint, contains the offices that the 6-story option would have presented. Does that cause you concern that you're building it out the whole way all at once? Do you understand what I'm saying? You were going to do it in phases. Now it looks like you're going to do it all at once.
The answer to your question is absolutely. It carries substantially more risk. Empty space is not fun, and it's going to make me have to work harder to get at least to make it successful. If Mr. Bernardi would like to make any comments, I can welcome him to the microphone.
Good evening, Chair, City Commissioners. This is a riskier project, but I think building just 4 and then 1, it's going to be much more expensive. I think in the long run, to build it all at once, obviously just economies of scale, but it does pose a risk. But we hope now that we have a year, we won't be breaking ground until probably next year. We have more time to hopefully find some more tenants. So, but I think we're very excited, and it's a beautiful project, and hopefully that will attract tenants.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Carpenter.
I like it. We've been here, we've seen this thing in various permutations over time. The only reservation I have is that maybe we should send them back again because it gets better every time.
Commissioner Platter.
I was going to say kind of the same thing. I said I liked it last time. I like it better this time. So,
Commissioner Staunton.
I want to echo Commissioner Shearer's comments. You guys have done a lot. I admire your persistence and your patience, and you have done everything that we've asked you to do, and so I appreciate that, and I hope the council likes it.
Thank you. We're looking forward to continuing the process and seeing you 2 more times. Thank you.
You are.
Commissioner Forrest.
That was a zinger, wasn't it? I really do appreciate the changes you've made to the corner. When I was looking through our packet, too, I was looking at our comp plan text, and one thing they say is that we should look for is transparency and natural surveillance. In other words, you get an idea of what's going on in the building. Well, obviously, on the medical floors, that's going to be a little bit different. But on ground level, since this is a sketch plan review and it's just open for comments, I guess I'd like to encourage that kind of vibrancy and tenants and not have, what looks like a window, but it's just obscured really from the inside, that kind of thing. But to have that kind of open appearance to the public is an appealing idea, especially if we're trying to attract people to our streetscape. So thank you again for your changes.
Other comments? Mr. Schroeder?
Nothing.
Okay. From my point, I appreciate the fact that you're back here with this. This is an important project for the city, and I certainly hope that it goes forward I hope we don't, I don't want the city to be seen as a place that makes development difficult. I appreciate your persistence and your patience.
Thank you.
And we hope that this, I think it's a great project. From the beginning, I thought it was a good project. So I wish you well. Other comments? Are you from, would anybody else wish to comment on this project? I think we outlasted all the residents from Point of France, so I assume that they were the... Sure. Anything else on this matter? Good luck with the City Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comments on the 2013 work plan?
Mr. Chair, or did you want to read it off?
Go ahead.
I missed the last meeting, and I assume there was some discussion about it, so I apologize if I'm duplicating any of that discussion. But as I looked at the plan, I think we're not doing enough planning. I think we're not being ambitious enough. I think I was trying to think about the things that we ought to be tackling, and so I spent a little bit of time with the comprehensive plan, which actually has a lot of a lot of items in it in the land use section on trends and challenges, the goals and policies, and as we did with the Grandview project, the Grandview is one of many different areas of potential change, or potential areas of change. And there's an interesting passage on page 4-30 of the comprehensive plan under potential areas of change that says that identifying these areas is an initial stage of guiding new construction, and it says, quote, "It is not an attempt to stimulate change, but to acknowledge that it may occur and be proactive in shaping it," close quote. And it seems to me, and then it goes on to identify 5 different areas of potential change, each of which include multiple places. So there's the North France corridor between Crosstown and 54th, and we've had a lot of discussion about the challenges that we've had with development. I think there's still 2 vacant lots right there on the east side of France that we once upon a time subdivided, but nothing really fits there, and I think we need to figure out how to make that transition from France Avenue to the streets that are on either side that are more residential. The second category is neighborhood commercial nodes, which includes the 44th and France Morningside neighborhood, but also includes Valley View and Wooddale, as well as 70th and Cahill. And I think it's safe to say that both of those areas are eventually going to be subject to some redevelopment, and I'd like to see us think about some ways think about how we want to accomplish that and how the community wants to accomplish that in the right way. Number 3 is community commercial nodes, which includes 50th and France and Grandview Heights. Obviously, we've done a lot on Grandview, and there's a lot happening at 50th and France, and those are other opportunities to be kind of forward-thinking and proactive about what we might accomplish. And then the Southdale area is the 4th item. We had a nice kind of proposal, sketch plan come in front of us for the corner of 69th and France, a residential proposal. But I thought that it really didn't, it kind of served as an island and didn't connect with the rest of that so-called super block. And the comprehensive plan even talks about trying to deal with the challenges that we have in these super blocks of parking dominating the experience and preventing an effective kind of multimodal transportation structure. And then finally, the fifth category it talks about is commercial and office corridors, both along 494 as well as the southern edges of Southdale. You know, I know years ago we had a presentation come in front of us, a proposal that we actually ended up approving on 77th Street. And I think a second time a hotel came in front of us, and sooner or later the economy will make that an attractive option again. Hopefully we'll see other things. But I think those are all examples of things that we could be tackling, and I think we should. And I think we should be, we should be figuring out a way to make that part of our work plan. That's a lot, and I don't pretend that we can get it all done in one shot. But particularly these neighborhood places, if you talk about a place like Valley View and Wooddale or Cahill, I think those are very amenable to perhaps not the scale, but some level of community engagement with the folks who live in those neighborhoods, who use those commercial nodes on a regular basis, and I just think that should be part of the work plan. The other thing I note, and I know the chair had circulated some information on this, is the comprehensive plan talks about transportation issues and land use issues really being integrated, and we can't. There's a line in there that talks about how you can't do effective transportation planning without thinking about the land use, and you can't do effective land use planning without thinking about the transportation. And I know, Mr. Chair, you've set up a joint meeting with the Transportation Commission for September, but I think that might be another topic. And all of that sounds like a lot of work, and I know there may be other items that come to us on a regular basis that we have to kind of react to. But we meet twice a month. We have a lot of members. We could certainly divide into some smaller groups of 2 or 3 and try to tackle some of these things and at least start to figure out some approaches. Then there are obviously the issues that have been, are in the draft. I'm not sure whether that included the most recent items that we've been wrestling with drainage and retaining walls and how to kind of coexist on smaller lots. But if not, I think we should certainly include those. And then finally, I think it's appropriate to have a discussion with the City Council. Obviously, the Grandview project and where that goes from here is in their bailiwick, and it's for them to decide how they want to proceed on that. I think, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the city has hired an economic development director, and that one of his primary focuses early on, I think, will be trying to figure out where to go with Grandview, but I assume we'll be part of that, and we ought to be, I'd like to see that just keep moving forward. So those were my thoughts on the work plan, and perhaps after that discussion, I just wanted to briefly talk as well about the work session that we're going to have with the council and other item that may be worth talking about with them.
Let me ask a question. Would you see some of these topics rising to the level of complexity and work as the Grandview area study, or do you see something less intense? I mean, you mentioned perhaps subcommittees of this group working on a particular issue, and how would you see that working? A subcommittee that takes a look, for example, at maybe 70th and Cahill and comes up with a work plan on how to consider that, and should we have public hearings, should we not, should we invite people in? What are your thoughts on that? Well, I think it's really going to be dependent on each different project. So Valley View and Wooddale, for instance, is really a pretty small area. On the other hand, you lay that next to figuring out what to do with Southdale. Those are 2 projects of dramatically different scope.
And so I think even those of us who worked on the Grandview project recognize that, you know, what's really important in order to be effective in kind of mining what people think and making sure that you're building a plan that a really wide spectrum of folks can buy into is that you don't go into it with a preset idea of how you're going to do it. That you have to kind of engage people and figure that out as you go along. Obviously, you got to strike the balance between resources and time and engagement and figure out what the right answer is in any situation. But I think that might be the kind of thing that if we split up a little bit, we might have some ideas to recommend to the full Planning Commission about how to proceed on some of those things.
Commissioner Schroeder?
I would agree with Commissioner Staunton. The only thing I would kind of amplify is that I think that there is a living streets policy kind of winding its way through the Transportation Commission. And as Kevin was suggesting, there's an important relationship between land use and transportation, and particularly as you start to advocate for a living streets policy, which really dictates that people be active on streets. It's not just providing the opportunity for modes, but actually getting people out there. And I think there's a strong correlation between the lands that are adjacent to corridors that we need to be looking at. And I think it's our responsibility as a planning commission to start weighing in on the context of our corridors and the land uses along those corridors.
Other comments and thoughts? I think these are good suggestions we need to take a look at, think about. I'd ask that we think about that and come up with some ideas and maybe some specific proposals on how some of these things might be addressed. And maybe thoughts on priorities as well.
To say how to prioritize those, how would you, maybe that's the first step, is prioritizing these areas, maybe what to look at versus maybe we can't get to them all, but what is the most important one? What's the ones that maybe something's coming up on, or if, you know, any rumblings on these areas to your point, kind of get ahead of it, or something comes in.
And before our next meeting, we'll be having a work session with the council to talk about this, and so perhaps we can get some gauge from them about their thoughts on, to the extent there's priorities or things that we've missed. Or
Gary, what's the date of that meeting again?
The work session is September 4th, and some of those ordinance items that aren't listed here on the work plan, that's kind of why they're not on there. We're going to talk about those items with the council. Then the work session regarding work plans with the council is September 19th, so we have a little bit of a deadline to work out the work plan.
Oh, I didn't realize there were two different work sessions.
They are.
The one on the 4th, we all attend, and the one on the 19th, we do not, correct?
Correct. That's just for the chairs.
Yeah, the 19th, it's all the commissions and all the boards. Talk about work plans in general.
It's just you on the 19th.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, Carrie, you said that on the 4th, we have a kind of a truncated session because there's something else that has to be covered at that.
We do, and it has, in regard to what Commissioner Staunton was just talking about, the AUAR area down there on 77th. Hillcrest Development is in the process of purchasing all those properties, and so they're going to just lay out to the council.
Maybe that's first.
Well, yeah, potentially. What they'd like to do is just restore some of those buildings, not to the point where they can't be redeveloped, but just get them functional in the short term, 2 to 5 years. And then they would like to, you recall we did that AUAR, the planning study for the entire area. That needs to be updated. So that's one where, and that's on the property owners, it's on their nickel to pay for that. So that's probably the opportunity that we have to do some planning within that whole area when we update the AUAR. And they're talking about wanting to do that in the next year or two. So that one could take care of itself, just in that regard. So that they're going to outline, and everybody's welcome to come and listen to what their plans are. That'll start at 5 o'clock, and then we go on at 5:30.
So is there an agenda for our September 4?
Not yet. We talked a little bit in our work session about some of the things that we wanted to discuss. The first one being the subdivision, PUD R1. We've got our draft ordinance that we've been talking about, so we want to get some discussion and feedback from the council on that. Then there's the building height issue that ties into the site grading, so that's another one that we wanted to discuss with them. And then the Grandview implementation, what we want to do next, was the third item. And I guess if there's anything else that we wanted to talk about in regard to work plan, another thought was we haven't had, you recall we've had some work sessions where the city attorney comes in and kind of gives us a refresher on planning 101 kind of thing. We could do that as well. We've only got an hour and a half, so I don't know how much time we want to invest in that, but that's another possibility.
I wouldn't.
We could certainly replace, pardon me, may I speak?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I mean, it strikes me, personally, the last suggestion in that limited time frame is not as appealing to me, but we could certainly add to the list Kevin's comments.
Right.
And add that as a discussion piece with the council in terms of what their interest or instruction would be to us with regard to looking at some of those larger items and prioritizing them. I definitely would support that.
So it could just be a work plan discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would think
that could take up as much time as you want. So.
We should probably schedule the city attorney anytime, but not necessarily
Yeah,
that
that could be
time.
a separate work session.
Yeah. And then, since we're talking about it, I had invited, or we've set up a meeting with the Transportation Commission for prior to, it's 6 o'clock on the, I guess that's the 26th of September.
It's like a Thursday now instead of a...
Yeah, that meeting is moved to Thursday because we can't meet on Wednesday. And the Transportation Committee and we would get together at the hour before our regular meeting and have discussion with them about 6.
6 p.m.
Right. Right. And that's not a formal meeting, but
Carrie will be nice enough to send out a reminder on that.
I will. I was thinking the 26th here today, as I just looked at it, but that's right. We did move that to the 27th.
Yeah, the 26th is some
The
religious
religious holiday,
So
right.
then you're proposing, Mr. Chair, then we'd have the meeting at 6 o'clock on the 27th with the Transportation Commission.
Correct. And we can meet for an hour and discuss our respective ideas on what's our role with respect to traffic and transportation, and what's their role with respect to traffic and transportation. What are they looking at, and what do we see, and what are we looking at? And I discussed that with, no, Jennifer's no longer the chair of that. Paul Nelson? Is
Yeah.
that- yeah. So let's think about, in advance of the meeting with the council on the 4th, which is fast approaching, how we might prioritize. Let's just have some thoughts on how we might prioritize some of these, the major issues. I think Kevin raises some good points there about what we should be doing. We get bound up on the specific issues, and sometimes we don't think enough about the bigger issues. Commissioner Forrest.
My understanding that one of the topics was going to be with regard to not just subdivision, but generally the issues that we have with teardowns and massive rebuilds, and if there's anything we want to codify as far as building on substandard lots, and I thought there was going to be some discussion of that at that meeting.
That might be under the building height
Yeah,
rating.
exactly.
I thought that came
I
under
just don't want it to get
general
lost in the
category.
mix, because I think we've had a lot of discussion here, and it'd be nice to get there.
Well, those first two items,
Explain.
subdivision and height and grading, those are all of a piece, I think.
Well, yeah, and for me, it specifically has to do with when you have a smaller lot than what we allow. Do we want to put any specifics? I mean, I've heard other people talking about putting some specific requirements on those lots to minimize negative impacts in the neighborhoods. And, if so, if no, whatever. But I think it should be clear so that we don't just keep having people come in and with variances or subdivisions and all of that.
Right. Right. We had considerable discussion, Commissioner Scherer particularly. Friendly discussion. Any other thoughts on the work plan or upcoming meetings? Okay, we'll proceed. Commissioner Scherer.
Well, I would say I really like Commissioner Staunton's comments. I mean, I do think proactivity is probably better with regard to those issues than sitting around and waiting for the market to change and suddenly we're dealing with individual requests. And it would be interesting to get the council's thoughts on how they want to proceed, how they see us proceeding and allocating our time to those projects. They're a significant part of the comprehensive plan's observations, and we really haven't done anything else with them after we signed the plan, or the council signed the plan. So I'd move those up on the list for discussion.
We'll do that. We need to have some serious discussion, I think, with the council on what they expect.
Well, so I was just going to let this go, but now I can't because you gave me a nice dovetail to it. So one of the things in that context about what the council expects, I don't, there's some really good things about the way our sketch plan process has worked, but this last go-around is not among them. And maybe that was the applicant's fault. There's, who knows, but this does seem like an opportunity to talk with the council about how we could have been so crosswise when we, I think unanimously, recommended it, and then it got shot down. So something wasn't, some communication wasn't working, or we weren't doing something that they expected us to do, or something. So,
well,
I don't know if that's just a one-off, or if there's a larger solution that maybe is out there to avoid that happening. Because I feel, like I say, I don't know that it's anybody's fault, but it has gone around for longer than it should.
They didn't take it for sketch plan.
Right, and maybe that,
So
they have to take responsibility for that. But
Done something else, I think.
Well, but, it's not a requirement.
No, but
It's not a requirement to go to sketch plan review. And they did come to,
they didn't go to council's sketch plan.
yeah, I'm glad they came back and decided that they want to go forward with the project.
I agree.
Because it would have been really bad if they just said, the heck with Edina, because it's too hard to do business with.
again, I don't want to point fingers. I just want to see if there's something we can do to make it not happen again.
Right.
Right, and maybe it is. Maybe it's
And
saying that,
maybe we do have a requirement. It's,
or maybe once you come to the planning commission with sketch plan, then you got to go to the council with sketch plan. I mean, maybe that's a.
maybe, yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe that doesn't solve everything, but it might just be worth a.
I think it would have gotten rid of an iteration.
Yeah.
You can make the argument, though, that it actually worked just fine.
Well, you can make that argument, but.
I agree with Jeff on that, because I think that if they hadn't come back a third time, we wouldn't have gotten the rounded corner on France. We wouldn't have gotten the improvements to the parking ramp. And especially with a PUD, it is a process of give and take. And, you know, they got some things they wanted, we got some things we wanted so far, if it goes through. But I think that, yeah, it was clumsy, it was a little bit clumsy this time, but I think we did benefit in a lot of ways too by having them spend their time and money going back and forth too.
Well, but gee whiz, I mean, that was a lot. And they're juggling a lot of things when they're trying to do a project like that, and they responded to a lot of, I was the most surprised guy in the room when I opened up my packet and saw that they had actually purchased the next lot. I mean, I thought that was just terrific. And so they kept doing the things we asked them to do. And all I'm saying is, yes, we should get the best project we possibly can, but we shouldn't ask people to go through any more than they absolutely have to do.
They put a ton of time in that thing.
The perfect is the enemy of the good.
I used that at work.
And, I mean, it's just like what Scott Busen said, is it our job to decide that somebody should have a 7-foot ceiling versus an 8-foot ceiling versus a 9-foot ceiling in their basement? Maybe not in the specific context of that particular request, maybe it is, but generally speaking, you don't want to discourage people from wanting to do business here.
So, Carrie, will there be like a draft agenda that you'll circulate before that meeting, and how are we going to? We're going to wait for who's running the meeting? I assume the mayor and the council, and we'll just respond to them, or is there something more proactive we should be doing?
It's really up to us. I've seen it done several different ways. Sometimes it's staff that presents a particular item. Sometimes, like the Heritage Preservation Board, they had a different member of the commission present each issue, and it wasn't so much staff. So I guess it's at your discretion.
I think we should presume that it's going to be that we are the moving party. It may not end up that way, but.
And not forget that if we start at 5:30 and their session starts at 7 with a 15-minute break before, we have precious tiny amount of time.
Yeah, I think we want to focus more on getting into the discussion. Just a quick, here's the topic, this is what we're thinking, let's talk about it.
Someone really needs to be a timekeeper.
Carrie, how about you and I getting together and talk about that, and then we can kind of distribute via email
Sure.
to some thoughts and ideas. Does that work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I lost where's my agenda? Got it. Any other comments on that? You received the council connection, you received the attendance report, we received the city council meeting minutes. Commissioner Platter was telling me it was a good thing that we got the bye last week because he was out of town. Worked out.
Worked out for me too.
For another reason.
Chair and commission member comments. I mentioned the meeting with the Transportation Committee. That's my comments. Any other commission members have a comment they wish to add? Staff comments.
Just one quick, Bill Neuendorf is the new Economic Development Manager, and he starts on Monday. So we'll hit the ground running with Grandview.
What's his background? Do you know?
He was on the Grandview Steering Committee. He's an Edina resident. I think he was a community development director in a suburb of Chicago is kind of the closest, what makes him such a great fit, I think, for this position. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for Edina. He's a real go-getter, positive attitude, and we're looking forward to having him get started.
Good. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you very much for your participation and patience tonight. We don't we don't normally go this late, and it's. I appreciate all of your input and participation. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.